Okay, we're live. Um, Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the August 10th, 2024 edition of the Free School. Oh, someone muted there. Oh, shoot, sorry. Sorry, okay, I think that was my issue. Okay, so sorry about that. So yeah, August 10th, 2024 edition of the Free School. We're meeting virtually today, and I think we'll be back in person next week at the Church of the Crucifixion. And so today we're just going to be assessing and reporting back on our big celebration of James Baldwin's 100th birthday last weekend in Philadelphia, which was a 3-day celebration on August 2nd, 3rd, and 5th. And so we'll go over each portion of that event with different people who worked on those various portions of the event. And then after that, we'll have a discussion of the upcoming Democratic National Convention that's happening later this month in Chicago. But just to start us off on the Baldwin celebration, I'll hand it over to Doc to get us started.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jerry. Good morning, everybody. Congratulations to the Free School on this 3-day celebration of the 100th birthday of James Baldwin. And I was saying to Purba, no, I think it was to Shantanu, who were texting. I just said, thank God for the Free School, because without the Free School or something like the Free School, Baldwin's 100th anniversary would turn out to be a celebration of identity politics, queer identity, postmodernism, and narcissism. And no mention of the Black Freedom Movement, his participation in it on their parts. No mention of a alternative chronology that helps to answer the unanswered questions that he sought to answer. And none of them, as far as I could see, and Purba or Shantanu maybe know more than I do, no mention of Baldwin's connection to Martin Luther King or to W.E.B. Du Bois. So what are they celebrating? So it turns out they're celebrating themselves. And as it turns out, the Free School is celebrating James Baldwin and putting him in the light that he deserves as a revolutionary. So I just wanted to say that, I just think it took us all to a different level. In some ways, I was thinking that for the 13 years of the Free School, all of those 13 years was in preparation for this celebration of James Baldwin. And now we will go forward to complete this. I think we have about 5 more months to go. Our reading groups will continue. There will be other events. I don't know, whether we will continue the podcast. I hope so. But at any rate, it was a real gift to the people of Philadelphia, and they have acknowledged it as such. And it involved many institutions and artists, the intercivilizational character of the art, and the artists performed in ways that they hardly ever performed. They were filled with enthusiasm and commitment. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I think this was in some ways like, even just for myself, this was partially like almost like what I'd been waiting for with the year of Baldwin without realizing it, what we were able to achieve with this celebration. And not just the amount of people who came out, but the quality of the people who came, and how they were able to see each other through Baldwin, I think was really beautiful. Um, but yeah, it was a really magnificent event. I'm really proud of Free School for having put it together and worked with all of these different institutions, including the Free Library, to put it together. But yeah, I'll pass it over to Purba to talk about the documentary, which she worked on along with a lot of other people in Free School, which was part of the kind of key thing for the first day of the event on August 2nd.
Right. So this was an original documentary with a script that was written by, Dr. Montero and Emily. And then, it was pieced together with footage from the Black Freedom Movement and Baldwin speaking about that time, and the place that that history has in the American revolutionary struggle. And it was titled "To Fulfill the Unfulfilled, to Answer the Unanswered, the Revolutionary James Baldwin." And just to start off, I think there are several documentaries that are available on Baldwin, but none of them come close to clarifying his relationship with the Black Freedom Movement and Martin Luther King Jr. like this one did. And I think it was a significant achievement, something that we feel really proud of, and it was a very strong script. Um, the reason why this documentary is so important and so timely right now is because if you look at what has been said about Baldwin, all the articles and the podcasts, especially in end July, beginning August, leading up to his birthday, that have come out, you can see clearly that there is a battle for ideological control over Baldwin's narrative, the narrative of his life and legacy. And in all of these attempts to explain Baldwin for this moment, what comes out very clearly is the attempt to frame him as a gay Black writer. The only way to use him today is almost like therapy, for to help yourself get in touch with your feelings and to understand who you're meant to be and all of that, but never the revolutionary James Baldwin. And just today, Doc shared an article with me which begins by talking about James Baldwin as somebody who came up reached his heights at the peak of the civil rights movement and gay liberation, G capital, L capital, to create this sort of false equivalency between these two movements. And in all of these things, what becomes very clear is the attempt to sever Baldwin's ties to the Black freedom struggle, and then to diminish and trivialize the Black freedom struggle by creating this false equivalency with the queer movement. And so I think when all of this is going on, it was very important to say what the documentary said, that there is something that is unfulfilled that needs to be fulfilled. There is something that is still unanswered that needs to be answered. And it's not LGBTQ rights. It's the question that Baldwin and King and the Black Freedom Movement posed, which is slavery ended, but why are Black people not free? And by extension, if Black people are not free, can dark humanity really be free? And this basically forces you to acknowledge that the revolutionary task is the end of a white supremacist social system that allows the enslavement of dark humanity up to this day. And it calls for America to be the last white nation. And this is something that I think the documentary did a good job of bringing out. And something that I think in my conversation with Shantanu, I was reminded of in that documentary, Meeting the Man, where, these white filmmakers are trying to talk to Baldwin in Paris and, talk about his art, his writing, or whatever. The question that Baldwin poses to them is, if you don't know what produced me as a human being, can you even know what questions to ask me as a writer? And it goes to the heart of what the documentary was talking about, that Baldwin was produced, in fact, by a Black social system that was rooted in a chronology that was fundamentally different from the chronology that's accepted as, describing modernity, but also the American revolutionary process. And this chronology begins with the anti-slavery struggle. It doesn't begin with Marx, and it doesn't begin in Europe. Um, the other thing, like I started with, that the documentary did well, I think, hopefully, is to show how concretely Baldwin was rooted in the Black freedom struggle. He went to the South. He knew all these people. He was working so closely with them. And this is an aspect of Baldwin's life that's hardly ever highlighted. You don't see it in any exhibition. You don't hear about it in any podcast. Nobody writes about it. His connection to King is not something that's spoken about. And all of this obscures our understanding of what the path forward to the American revolutionary process can even look like. Baldwin does not speak like a Marxist Leninist. He doesn't speak like the left liberal elite. He speaks in a language that comes from the Black church. It comes from that Black proletarian imaginary. And if you have these dogmatic ideas of what revolution is or what a revolutionary looks like, that, comes from that European chronology, you can never identify in his language revolutionary theory, which is what we sorely need in this moment. And the other thing that I think was very significant in the documentary was love, the concept or the category of love as the basis for revolutionary struggle, which is something that most so-called radicals or, progressives would scoff at because it seems like a sentimental idea. But to King and Baldwin, it was really the path, the only path to salvation for not just American people, but people anywhere. And this idea of love is love in its broadest sense, in its most revolutionary sense, which is the love for humanity, belief in the capacity of human beings to not just produce great beauty, great art, great civilization, but also the capacity to transform society, to take humanity to the next stage of the struggle. And Baldwin even believed that it was not within the realm of possibility for white people to believe that whiteness was what was holding them back, what was the cause of their ruin, and on the basis of that understanding to transform themselves and their country. And to take that broad vision of love and to circumscribe it and narrow it down to a commentary on sexuality or gender identity is, in my opinion, frankly disgraceful. And I also think it's suicidal in some ways because it cuts you off at the knees and it makes it impossible to envision how we are going to move forward. So these are some of the things that I want to highlight from the documentary, and I know other people will have lots to say also. But because of these reasons and because of the time that it speaks to, I think it was a great achievement for the free school.
Emily, did you want to add anything?
Oh yeah, sorry I came on late. I'm feeling kind of sick. Um, yeah, that's the it's the pro and con of free school being so close is we share everything, including our lives and also our germs. So, so us all being sick is a testament to how close we are as people and in our ideas. Um, yeah, I think it's before I get into the documentary, I guess I just also wanted to say that I think this 3-day event I felt I felt really proud of, and it's almost hard to describe just how proud I felt. And it's not simply because of all that we accomplished in terms of we did so much, but rather I feel like we actually did what we've been trying to do for a long time, but I think we did it the most here, which is do justice to James Baldwin, the revolutionary and the man. And I guess I also wanted to say that this is something Raju had told me when we were talking recently, where he was like, it is because it's something that most people will try to deny because they are deliberately trying to withhold or put down the ideological struggle, but that it is because of free school doing a whole year, James Baldwin starting back in February and crystallized with this 3-day birthday celebration that has forced the whole country to say something about Baldwin. Like the fact that people are talking about Baldwin from the Financial Times to all these different exhibits across small and large institutions is because like we put our stake in the ground in the first place to assert James Baldwin as God's revolutionary voice. And I think that is a huge achievement. And I also think that what I saw in those 3 days, and I think you saw it in the exhibit, the concert, but especially the documentary days and the exhibit days, is that I felt the most strongly the sense that the people, especially the people of Philadelphia and Black Philadelphia, have an immense respect for those who defend the truth and an immense respect for those who defend our revolutionary inheritance, which can be found in the Black freedom struggle. And I feel like you got that a lot because the way people felt so warm and open, like those who came to our events, and I think there were different people who came to different events, but then there were people who came to all three events and stayed throughout. That there's a sense that it's something we know, but I really felt this confluence like very strongly this time of it is truly James Baldwin and his revolutionary thinking and King and the Black freedom struggle that really shaped him that is not only in our inheritance but is exactly the language, the foundation of a new language and a new people. And I think I saw that this time. But yeah, the documentary, honestly, I think the documentary was the ideological engine of this event. Like I think like Purbo was outlining, I think the documentary, like it was a lot of work ideologically from the get-go of like, yeah, similar to Doc. It's funny because when Doc is like, oh, I was ready to give up. Well, to be honest, I was also kind of ready to give up because I was like, what the fuck? You want us to make like we're gonna make a documentary so soon, scripted. And it's the work is not just making it, the work is the ideas. And that is a huge task to define. Well, Baldwin as a revolutionary, what does that mean? What are the assumptions that you would have to like the assumptions that make people not see Baldwin as a revolutionary that you'd have to first identify and then understand why. Like, okay, chronology based in Europe does not explain the question of the world, which is also the question of humanity, dark humanity, the future of humanity. And for us to clarify the chronology, that there is a revolutionary chronology in this country that helps explain the revolutionary process in the future of this country, that in some ways is almost like it also explains why it's such an inconvenient reality for the majority of Americans, and is the exact hindrance stopgap between like unfreedom and freedom. Like I think that's a huge achievement, and it's something that shaped the whole rest of the event as well. Like the concert, which essentially was like the concert was a great expression of humanity and civilization. And what will you choose? Do we choose war or do we choose civilization? Do we choose war or do we choose humanity? And then there's that Monday exhibit. You know, I don't think it's to be taken lightly that it is the Free School in partnership with the Education, Philosophy, and Religion Department to take up those two central cases in the Free Library. And I was honestly very emotional to seeing Doc speak in the lobby of the Free Library like that. Because I felt the same way that Doc did, which is, I think this is 13 years. Like, this is 13 years in becoming. It felt like it was 13 years of, like, doing the idea, like, embarking, like, waging or doing the ideological struggle, not because it was popular, but because it's the exact thing that could change the capacity of the people to take up our inheritance and like determine the future. And yeah, I just think there's a lot to be proud of. Um and I think starting with that day of the documentary where we had to essentially like defend, not just put forward, but also defend like James Baldwin and how he speaks to our time and speaks to the crisis. He doesn't speak to culture. He speaks to, in fact, the political crisis today and will be the future of even like the American people today, I think was a huge achievement. And I feel like I'm not doing a good job at really expressing just how deep my feelings are. Like it was very emotional to actually reflect on it this week. And I'm really proud of all we did. And I actually think this is something that we won't just remember for a long time, but I think the people of Philadelphia will remember.
Yeah, I think in response to what you were saying, also from the event as a whole and then the documentary, I think part of what we are in some ways experimenting with and seeing through our own actions through like this event, but also all the stuff that Free School has been doing for the past 13 years is it's basically this thing of like when we talk about like the ideological struggle, I feel like that can mean different things to different people. But part of what we have been almost like the evidence that we have been able to bring into light is like what it looks like when the people take up the ideological struggle as their own struggle. And the way that they do that is basically through a figure like Baldwin. And to basically meet on the ground of Baldwin, and like you were saying, Baldwin as the revolutionary and Baldwin not just as like a cultural icon, that qualitatively changes, I think, the way that people even see themselves and how they see other people, how they talk with one another. And yeah, I don't know. It just felt like, especially from that documentary and like the discussion afterwards, I think it drew out a lot from people. Like it drew things out that maybe they hadn't thought about for a while, or maybe they thought about but had never felt like they could talk about with anyone. And I think it manifests in different ways for people. But like even like theoretical or philosophical questions of like I think one kind of line of discussion that came out of the documentary and the discussion afterwards was almost you could put it as like, is Baldwin quote unquote a special theory that fits within a larger general theory of like quote unquote of Marxism, for instance? And then that was one way that someone, I think, in response to the documentary, was trying to understand, I guess, like where Baldwin fits in. And I don't know, and I just feel like it's really important, like that we're actively like we're not just thinking through this as Free School, but we're bringing people in to actually like think through questions which are basically the defining questions for the future of this country and by extension the future of humanity. And I think it's really, I don't know, yeah, like I also struggle sometimes to wrap my head around and to find the right language for it. But like it just means a lot to me that to see basically like all these people who we'd never met before, people who just happened to come because they saw a flyer in like East Passyunk or something. And to feel like, oh, like not just that Baldwin belongs to me, but that I like also that I owe something to him. And I don't know, it's just it was just really powerful to me. And then I think like yeah, I think also with the documentary, part of what was really like moving, and I think this was something that people really liked a lot, was just like the music that you guys chose. And basically like music also is not just like a soundtrack, but music as yeah, like almost yeah, like a revolutionary force in a way. And yeah, I'm excited for when we can put up the documentary on YouTube and stuff for others to see. But yeah, I just felt like the combination of the songs that you guys chose with the different portions of Baldwin's life and his ideas, and basically the framing of the documentary not just being like a quote unquote like a biography of Baldwin, but actually like Baldwin as a way to interrogate, and Baldwin as someone who interrogated basically yeah like these unanswered like questions of like revolutionary change of history. And I feel like one question that I think I'm going to continue thinking about from like the documentary with what Porbo was saying was like yeah, this question of love, and does love become, through the Black freedom movement, does love itself become a category of historical change, um, or an engine? You can even say part of the engine of historical change and development, um, through the Black freedom movement. And I guess that also goes back to like India's freedom struggle and like Satyagraha and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to say that in response to the documentary, and I guess before we go to the next day, if anyone else wants to comment, yeah.
Can I add just one small thing about the music that you reminded me of? I completely agree that the tracks that we chose, Thelonious Monk, Archie Shepp, Coltrane, but then also Mahalia Jackson, Aretha Franklin, all of this. It's not. You're right. It was not just an accompaniment or a soundtrack for the documentary. It actually explains what we were trying to say about the revolutionary chronology, because this if the revolutionary chronology begins with the anti-slavery struggle, it begins with Frederick Douglass, then you also have to see the music and the way it evolved as part of that common striving, which called for the death of white supremacy, which called for freedom of black folk, not just because they're black in the identity sense, but because they're human beings. And in doing so, it called for broad freedom for all of humanity. And again, this is as much a part of the project of clarifying Baldwin and clarifying the revolutionary struggle, because in some ways, just in the there's an attempt to appropriate Baldwin and make him into a cultural icon, or somebody who fits in with identity politics. There's also a similar attempt to reshape the cultural landscape, reshape the music of the people, take away this triumphant, life affirming, hope giving music and replace it with hip hop. And this is also something that needs to be, fought against, and, it needs to be defended. So I wanted to add that.
Yeah, I also wanted to add on because this is something that, like, I think the whole editing team took to a new level of when we say chronology. I know it might be obvious to everyone, but I think to me, in the process of making the documentary, it was a huge revelation. And I hope that the audience took it away too. And I think they did, which is like, in order to see Baldwin as just a cultural icon, you have to basically completely cut him off from everything that shaped who he is, like for his childhood. And that's something the exhibit builds upon too. You have to cut him off from his mother and everything that shaped him, Harlem, all the people who shaped Harlem, who came from the South. Like, basically have to sever him from exactly the people in that great struggle beginning in the South, in the defeat of Reconstruction. You could even bring it back to the slave trade, the Middle Passage. You basically have to cut him off from everything that makes him James Baldwin and just make him a shapeless, genderless, colorless, like, block, like, clay putty that can be misappropriated whatever you want. And I really think we showed it because, for example, some people might say King, it's the same way that King in some ways is the most easily cast aside, because you just assume that King is an individual, some sort of special individual. But actually, within King is reflected millions of people who have the same capacity. And I feel like we showed it especially with Emmett Till's mother. Like, the way we showed even before the Black freedom struggle, this is what was leading up to the Black freedom struggle, the Third American Revolution. It's the defeat of Reconstruction, where even though there's emancipation, Black people were not free. It's the way Emmett Till's mother, after her son was so brutally killed, the way she said, she was like, I hope my son would not die in vain if we could make him a hero. And the way she says, if you stand, this is not my fight, it's your fight, it's our fight. And if you will stand by me, I will always stand by you. You really get the sense from her and Rosa Parks, and then all the nameless ordinary people from the North, the South, Black, and then especially Black, and then eventually whites too. You get this great sense of this, this is not just the revolutionary chronology, but this is the exact, in some ways, law and chance of American development, the law and chance of the American revolutionary process. And for us to condense it so visually like that in the documentary was, I think, a huge, and then with the script and, like you said, the music, it's huge, because same with the music, where do you think all this great music comes from? Like, it comes from a people who've been shaped by struggle, who've been shaped by resistance against the condition of unfreedom, yet always asserted that I know that I'm unfree, yet I know I am a human being. And I think we really asserted that. And in some ways, I think we set the conditions for people to understand why love is such a revolutionary force. Because the only weapon against the exact thing that has divided society, like white supremacy, to define white supremacy as not really about white, but white supremacy is about anti-human, anti-love, going against going against all the strivings of a human being. To be in community, to care for the child, to be concerned with the future, to be concerned with the immortal child. That's what white supremacy is. It's an anti-human, anti-love, like ethic, tool, weapon, and that the only weapon against that, which is the root of like essentially all the things that we consider like capitalist exploitation and whatever, all, you know, everything we see today, that the weapon that heals is love. And I feel like we really I think the documentary sets up people to understand why love, you know, because if you don't choose love, and if you don't, it means you're choosing not to believe in a future, and you're also choosing not to believe, to not, for your worldview not to be concerned about like what will happen to the child, what will happen to the child, my child's child, my child's child's child. And that's Baldwin. And for us to make the case that that was Baldwin's central question, like Baldwin's central question was not about sex. His central question was not not sex in of itself. It was not about like anything that people want to divide his life into. It was always about, well, what about the child? Not just about my life, but what about the child? And I think we made that case on that first day, which set up the other 2 days.
Yeah. After our 3 days, I came back home to New York City. And actually, something I realized coming here is that our celebration of Baldwin and the substance of his ideas and the people who came together really could have only happened in Philadelphia. And the reason why I say this is because I'm back home, and definitely since moving, I have less of a grasp of this city, even less than I had growing up here. But yeah, I just can't see something like those 3 days happen in New York City. And I think part of it is the culture and of the ruling elite, and this being a center of the misappropriation of Baldwin. Baldwin as a cultural icon, Baldwin as an individual, Baldwin as irrelevant to our times, actually relevant to our times and the crisis that people and the ruling elite are going through. And thinking to the 3 days, it's also hard to separate it from the rest of the year and all of the hard work that we've done throughout the city, because I think in a way it was such an event that required so much work, but it also was organic to the year, that like the whole year and dedicated to Baldwin, but also the years of the free school have led up to us being able to truly put forward the revolutionary Baldwin in a way that could displace the like ideological monopoly of Baldwin, where nowhere else was, because it almost felt like almost felt futuristic to me, in the sense that of course we would have people who, you know, would ask about his sexuality or the fact that he slept with whoever. But the thing is, as a whole, our documentary, our art exhibit was a different Baldwin, the real Baldwin. And the center was not around, or the center was the Baldwin that actually speaks to our times and can bring people together. because that was something that I think really stood out to the members of the free school, because after having done so many events, you start to realize that actually during the event you both have to keep things moving, but the other part is to observe people, the kinds of people that come in, um, uh, and it's both in terms of things as like different sections of society, whether you're white, you're black, whatever, your age group, where you've grown up, but also your psychological and spiritual uh, complex. Because and I think it was through many of our observations that we saw that it was such a group of individuals that have come together, like Jeremiah was saying, on this meeting ground of Baldwin. And they could come together because of the true Baldwin. Like if it was anything else, whether it's identity politics, whether it's, I don't know what else is out there, like this group of people couldn't have come together and meet and talk to each other for the first time. And I think the other piece that stood out to me, and we should give ourselves a pat on the back, which is of how much we're channeling Baldwin and the Black freedom struggle in the way that we try to be such welcoming, like decent human beings to anyone that comes, and also to uphold these ideas that actually are not easy to uphold when everything is telling you that Baldwin is this other thing. And so yeah, you could feel that there was a sense of trust of the audience and with us, and recognizing that, oh, these people are actually true individuals. Like they have convictions about why we're celebrating Baldwin. It's not just something about, this Black queer man, blah, 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 but actually that he was a good man, that he was part of a people and a struggle. And and that was a piece that really stood out to me too, just or that revealed actually the capacities of the American people, that they're looking for. Like for those who showed up, they gave us confirmation that people are looking for a meeting ground. They are looking for principles and ideas, because it was a question mark for us. People who have been so battered with the psychological, ideological attacks, if they would still have the capacity to come together. And this showed us essentially that people are looking, despite how much they might be going through, and they could appreciate someone like Baldwin. I think even to end on just like general remarks of this being only possible in Philadelphia, and it is the reason that it's a Black city, it's a poor city. And I actually mean this because, in the free school, we keep talking about how America must become Black. And, for some time I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. Like, I get what you're saying, Black freedom struggle, King. But it was really through the people that, and individuals that we met, where the language of Baldwin and King, in which we uphold, is also reflected in the language of ordinary Black people in Philadelphia. It was actually so affirming that someone who worked at the library, I was like, oh, this is an exhibit dedicated to Baldwin. And he was like, this is the truth right here. And I could not imagine, like, a Chinese American, maybe me, being like, this is the truth right here. And, that immediate recognition of a certain language that also reflects certain values and a history, a story of America. And that's why I say it's making more sense to me that this comes out of Philadelphia, and this comes out of Black people who have this essentially moral authority in this country.
Yeah. Can I just add to what you're saying? Just briefly, I think like this question of language in a way, when we talk about a new language, and this time from Baldwin, that reflects many different things. Like you're saying, it reflects both a question of history and of chronology and of the experience of a people, but it also reflects a social relationship. When we say that Baldwin gives birth and helps the American people to achieve a new language, that means it kind of implied within that is the question of the achieving of new social relationships, because a language is in some ways a shorthand for like how people relate to one another, how they see one another, how they see themselves. And I think, yeah, like part of what, it's almost like you can see it as like testable hypotheses, I guess, to use like a scientific way framing. But yeah, like part of what we're struggling for is there's a Baldwin who has been claimed by the elite, like you're saying, Alice. But then there's also the Baldwin that belongs to the people and will always belong to the people. And part of, even I think what's been really interesting and actually very challenging about, like, especially like these 3 days and the entire year of Baldwin, is I don't know if people online, I think it's harder to get a sense of this online, but like every time we do an event, whether it's at like the Church of the Crucifixion, or it's like at the Free Library, that's not something that comes easily. There has to actually be a struggle to be like, no, like these institutions, many of which have basically either been destroyed over the past couple of decades, or they've just basically been like hollowed out and turned into like kind of empty vessels that are used by like politicians, for instance, or by like cultural elites, all of that stuff. I think when we do, like, for instance, like when we did the exhibit or when we did this concert at the Church of the Crucifixion, which was Du Bois's church when he was here doing the Philadelphia Negro study, I think, like that is also a struggle to be like, do these institutions, can they still belong to the people? Can they still be palaces for the people? And that's not something to be taken lightly. And I don't know, it's something that's very hard to convey just by like kind of watching and listening to us online. But that's part of like almost like that element of like, where's the revolutionary struggle today? I'm very happy because I think this event was, yeah, like Alice was saying, it's in some ways a reminder or confirmation of like, I'm exactly where I think the revolutionary struggle is today, which is with you all, and basically engaging in this struggle to like not just like to bring Baldwin back and to like revive him, but to actually like continue with what Baldwin was doing, and trying to achieve something that he saw, which was not yet completed or not yet fulfilled. And I think part of that is like, yeah, if you frame it as like testable hypotheses, it's like, if like, let's say if you're interested in like, oh, like how do you quote unquote unite the working class? Do you just unite the working class by saying like, oh, like you have a common interest, that kind of thing? And there's a very abstract way of putting that, but the actual concrete way of putting it, the universal concrete way that we've discovered and are discovering through the work that we're doing in free school, is actually, it's like literally it is through a figure like Baldwin, or it's like more specifically through something like the Black freedom struggle, that becomes a much more genuine, real, concrete meeting ground for many different kinds of people to actually unite and to develop a new kind of relationship, a principled relationship with one another, when American society as a whole is so beset by unprincipled relationships, false relationships, lies, and all that stuff, and basically dishonesty, which is part of what Baldwin gets to. And it's like, yeah, like if you're trying to speak to like quote unquote the American working class, like will you basically try to default to like, oh, like folk music or like country music, whatever, like none of which is like bad per se, but it's like part of what we're trying to test out is like, no, actually, like whatever you may think, in some ways Aretha Franklin is a much more like, that is a real meeting ground for all kinds of people, especially even if you're interested in this question of like black white unity for the working class or whatever. It's like in the realness of American society and the concreteness of American society, it becomes the Black freedom struggle, which is actually the uniting thing, and not just kind of like this abstract notion of like, oh, we need to unite the working class, like whatever. So yeah, I just wanted to add that in response to what Alice was saying. But yeah.
Wait, that's an interesting point that you brought up about how Baldwin is used or taken upon by the ruling class, basically. I don't know exactly how to put it because I don't even think the ruling class is like a correct term. There's more terms than that. But because why is he the figure that I guess needs to be malaligned or adjusted to the white social system, white supremacist? Like, why is he the person that that the ruling elites want to smear? And like at the same time, like with the like when we did the year of Du Bois, we know that Du Bois is also a figure that is smeared. But then it's interesting why Baldwin is taken, and in the theoretical, philosophical, ideological ways that he was taken. I just wanted to bring that up to highlight that because I think that gives me an understanding to moving like forward, like what were the particular political and ideological questions addressed in the year, in this either event or in the year, and what other questions do we need to address? Like, why is the queer or the sexuality or the individual thing like a big like why is Baldwin made to be a reactionary rather than a revolutionary? And what is true is that what we were bringing out in general is to say that there's a revolutionary process to pick up by people, and that's a truth that is almost unavoidable. And, or like there's like something that we say like there's a process, and it could be that it's inevitable or not or whatever. But part of the ideological struggle is to achieve different levels, different stages of its or the revolutionary process. And so why is Baldwin a figure that we need to hold on the side of truth, on the side of people, on the side of the Black freedom movement, on the side of King, to move forward? I thought that was interesting.
I think something that Emily said reminded me, I think the part where she was talking about your children and your children's children and how we are responsible to them. It reminded me that on Baldwin's birthday, um, I was I was rereading a part of Nothing Personal, and I remembered this thing that he wrote, um, and he writes, "For nothing is fixed forever and forever and forever. It is not fixed. The earth is always shifting. The light is always changing. The sea does not cease to grind down rock. Generations do not cease to be born, and we are responsible to them because we are the only witnesses they have." And I do think that in a way the last part of the documentary where we talk about love really encapsulates exactly this sentiment or this idea that Baldwin had about um, a very unique kind of love which is capable of being harnessed by everybody but whose recognition is unfulfilled. And that is what we were kind of trying to fulfill through this documentary. And I saw this documentary for the first time at the church. I had not seen it during its making. And as I sat there and I watched it, um, one of the one of the things that really struck me was that how this documentary is as much about the civil rights movement as it is about Baldwin. And I think that this inseparability is this documentary's biggest strength. Somebody who does not really understand or um, doesn't have a doesn't know Baldwin or the civil rights movement very well, when they watch this documentary and they are unable to distinguish it, that is what really makes our documentary unique, because you're not supposed to see it as separate. Even the decision of starting the documentary when Baldwin was 33, you know, that decision was also an important decision, because his life, as we would like to have shown it, began when he became invested in the civil rights movement. And that did not take away from his upbringing, as Emily was saying, but it sort of um, highlighted that all that he did was possible because of the black social system and his upbringing, what he went through. And, a lot of biographical documentaries, start with his life in Harlem, and you work your way up, and by the time you get to the end, there's really no time to explore what he was really about. And I think it was really, I'm just going through some of the parts which I thought was, yes, this is clarifying. Yes, this is what would touch people and people will take away with them, hopefully. I think that Giovanni's Room is, I don't know, I would call it a gateway book into queerness and sexuality and the misappropriation of Baldwin. And I think it was important to have that part in the documentary where Baldwin says that Giovanni's Room is not about homosexuality, it's about love and what happens to a person when he or she is unable to love somebody. Hearing it from Baldwin, I think, does something to you. Hearing the sincerity in his voice when he says something like this. And I think the entire uh, documentary has been an immense effort to do what the title suggests, to answer the unanswered, to fulfill the unfulfilled. I think Baldwin gives us the tools to do it. I like having read a lot of Baldwin, he doesn't give you very straight answers, but he gives you the tools. He gives you the courage, he gives you the inspiration, and he gives you, the choice, the moral choice. He says that this is something that you can do. Everybody's capable of doing it because everybody's human. And people have uh, tried to, like, there's only two ways that you can go with civil rights leaders. If you can appropriate and misappropriate them, you do that, which has happened in the case of Baldwin. And if you can't do it, you try and erase them, which has happened with King and Robson. And I was so delighted that Robson was in this documentary. Within the 5-10 minutes of the documentary starting, I see Robson and him singing. And I recently read The Devil Finds Work, and I hadn't read it before. And Baldwin talks about Robson in that essay, and he says that he's one of the two most underutilized actors, black actors in Hollywood. And he said that whatever Robson has done, his truth shines through his acting, even though the script does not do him justice. And that was really, uh, it, I felt really, happy seeing all of these faces, from Nina Simone to Aretha Franklin to Paul Robeson, and everybody who um, played a part in the civil rights movement was there, and Baldwin belonged with them, not apart from them, you know. And I think at this point, I do want to bring in that article that you shared with me in the morning, Doc. And I think I agree with you that the person who wrote that documentary, first of all, I just wanted to read the name of the exhibit of this that is in Washington D.C. It's This morning, this evening, so soon, James Baldwin and the voices of queer resistance. As opposed to Love and Revolution, James Baldwin speaks to our time. And you can really see how narrow and you just morally hollow and ideologically hollow their position is. And having read this article as well as the 4 interviews that are part of it, you can see that it's exactly what we were saying, that it's narcissistic. It's like saying that, oh, Baldwin taught me how to take care of my own voice. But his voice was not his own. He was a witness for the people and the time and the movement, and he was speaking to this time and even to our time at this point. And it was it was a difficult read. But then another thing that was part of it was that this one person said that there's an iconic photo of Baldwin holding up this "Do you love me" sign, and they said that, oh, this actually shows what loneliness must exist in Baldwin, misunderstanding Baldwin, misunderstanding love, and misunderstanding his revolutionary nature. And which is what made me think that even the process of understanding that Baldwin is a revolutionary act in itself, which we have, I think, managed to do through this documentary and through this event. Yeah. Oh, and I do agree with Reverend Ike Miller that the only complaint I have about this documentary is that there wasn't enough music in it.
Well, that's the thing, though. Like defining what I mean. The whole thing about revolutionary is kind of corny because it's like messed up term and mangled term and unappreciated term because a lot of people who use it aren't genuine when they use it. And I think the thing that I wanted to say about free school is that when we say something, we mean it, and there really isn't any backing away from it. Meaning, like there is a distinction that we're making with whatever it is that is an occupation that a person takes up. Is it for the people? Is it for the child? Or is it for the ruling elite? Is it for whiteness? And that's like the stake that Emily was raising or saying about the past couple of days and the year of Baldwin. Like, I don't, it might be hard to believe, but we are a group of people who decided upon doing something for a positive revolutionary purpose, whether that be because someone already has taken up the struggle, aka Dr. Martha or whatever, but or any of us who have been in or have been journeying together um, in free school, every one of us that I'm seeing today, which is why I was emotional when I got onto this stream, because even if I felt like I was releasing as much as I could, like seeing everybody, having this meeting today, knowing that we'll have a meeting next week to really work it out still um, is a testament to a certain commitment towards a genuine like reality that I think that we're trying to make possible. And I think that it is true, Doc, when you're saying that the musicians at the concert in particular had played with a certain energy. Why was that energy there? Like, why? And it's like all these questions. Why is Baldwin a revolutionary and not a queer voice for resistance? Like, why? Because, well, what else is there that is real that people like can operate upon and find themselves a part of in the human in this world as like, you know, like, because what makes America different from China? Could we have celebrated Baldwin in China? It doesn't mean that we couldn't have. It means that there's something about America that has to work itself out. And I think that we need, we need something from the Black freedom movement, in the sense, like, what is wrong really with studying King, or what is wrong really with studying Baldwin to be an artist, like, for real, and not just to be paid? Like, what is wrong with actually studying philosophy to be a scientist, for the, like, to develop science, and not just, you know? And I think the difference that we are making, or the difference, or like the thing that we're doing, that I guess to some of us is becoming apparent, but to me it's just like, well, it needs to be done. It's something that is unavoidable. Like, I don't think that I could be doing anything different. Is like, it's not half-stepping, like saying full-throatedly, like, I either play out of John Coltrane, and understanding what that really means, or and I think the gap, like, I think we're just narrowing the gap so that we can almost be able to move forward some of the developments that were made already by the people that we're celebrating. And I guess that's the importance of what you're saying, Shantanu, to the documentary, or like what we're saying in general, which is like, which is not to be like a whole big thing, but it's like, well, we strive for the truth, and the truth is squashed because there is a ruling elite attacking the people, that is working against the people, working against progress, working against King. Like, that's what killed King. And to live up to his legacy, like, what do we deserve to be? Understanding and becoming and thinking about, like, living, like, what do we deserve to be ingesting? Like, culturally, music, everything. Like, it was revealing to me, the exhibition and the difficulties of it, because it is true, Jeremiah, the library should be a palace for the people. And maybe it is also true, like, Philadelphia is a specific city, just as Chicago or DC are also specific cities with certain complex, like, networks of finance and people that are trying to arrange a certain narrative, or a certain idea of what the city could be. So there's something specific about Philadelphia. There's something specific about Free School. But it was revealing to me that to do, or to even go as far as to say that Baldwin with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, with Baldwin with King, like Baldwin with Dorothea Cotton, with Harlem, like, and this is what I mean, like, also to what you said, Alice, like, Harlem, like, Black Harlem, like the church, like, all the things that I guess the white ruling elite do not want to look at, because it is the power source. It is the power source of the American people. Like, you cannot ignore the quality and the reality of a striving people, regardless of whatever assumption or narrative, or university-led professor, or reactionary, like, nonprofit, like, co-organizer, leader are trying to, like, produce a certain, like, leading narrative against. But there's still, like, this long history of struggle that cannot be forcibly removed, or washed away, or washed over, because of a white supremacist interest, like or because of Soros money funding, or whatever it is. Like, so So because we're associating Baldwin with these people and we're trying to write something that is, you know, true, then everything also becomes different. Like, are you a librarian because of, like, what is the purpose of becoming something? Like, that becomes the question again to the fore. Like, is it for education for the people? Like, you have to go there. And I think that's part of what, like the real kernel of it all, like even Osiris singing, like, it's not even the quality of his, like, music, but like, what is he actually striving to do and become, and is he actually doing it? And does he show an example of what to do when you also are struggling to do the same thing? We're all struggling to do the same thing. And that's what I mean, that there is something like that's happening here when we are acknowledging this is the 100th anniversary of James Baldwin and recognizing him as a revolutionary. Like, it's not as like simple as like, well, of course, but it's like, well, how do you associate them because of it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like basically through the event, it's like free school put forward certain questions and assertions as well, which we cannot back away from, and we can only move forward. But that's also related to questions that have been placed in the hearts of people who came, and not just free school people, but everyone who came. And I think it's really, I don't know, I feel like it's really important that, like, through Baldwin, through this event, like you're saying, Serafina, like, people have been compelled to raise certain questions of themselves and who they are and what they aspire to be. And like the question is like, will you back away from that question, or will you continue to like actually to try to answer it, I guess. And I guess, yeah, I know that we're kind of like going through different paths, but I wanted to also ask, yeah, like Alice, Serafina, other people who were part of the, organizing the concert, if you guys could like talk about the concert as a whole. And yeah. Oh, Doc, you're muted. Sorry? Wait, Doc, you were muted. Could you say it again?
Pardon me?
You were muted. Could you say it again?
Oh, yes. I just wanted to just say a small thing about the documentary. And this, I think, relates to what everybody is saying about the people. First of all, what is, I don't want to use hyperbolic language. What the free school demonstrates in this city and perhaps beyond is that it is necessary to take an ideological stance. That one thing about the documentary, and it is well produced, well edited, well thought out, it is packaged in a way that people can grasp it. And this is very important because the ideas in it are not easy ideas. And it's a documentary that people will and can view many times and share with their families, their children. It's that kind of thing. But I want to talk about the part on chronology, because without getting that straight, the African American people and the people of this country cannot see their place in history. And that was the very thing. This chronology places America and the crisis of America in a certain chronology that can make sense. And that chronology makes King, makes Baldwin, makes Douglass, makes Du Bois. They all make sense within this chronology. I think, and this is hard as we talk about it, I think that was perhaps kind of the most difficult part ideologically, to take a stance and say that it's not 1848 that leads to Baldwin, is the anti-slavery struggle and Reconstruction. That Baldwin, I think we say it, Baldwin's genealogy as Baldwin begins with Reconstruction and its defeat. I think that we will return to that. You know, we've been talking about it a lot. We will return to this question because that's the key to explaining the way forward for the American people. There is no revolutionary way forward without the chronology that we presented. I think that solves a huge ideological problem in American society. And of course, we associated it with 1848 and the Communist Manifesto up to the Russian Revolution. But our point is that it still leaves unanswered huge questions. What was the Black Freedom movement all about? You cannot understand it with that chronology. You just can't. And the other side of this, we talk, is the liberal dogma that America is moving forward, that personal freedoms are being expanded, that the spearhead of the current movement for individual and personal freedom is the LGBTQ movement. Black people are, of course, free because you had Obama. All of this delusional garbage, which takes the people of the United States and Black people in particular out of the revolutionary and historical process. No way they fit in. No way. And so I think we establish a ground for us to further expand ideologically, to further engage and talk to the people, because now it can make sense to them. You are a part of history. You will make history. You are on the cusp of making history. Your history has a genealogy. This chronology explains you. It explains you as a human being, no matter what the trials and travails that you, your family, your children, your community face. This explains you and gives you a role in making history. And that's why when Pulba was sending me things and I was sharing with Shantanu and other people, what all of these so-called celebrations of Baldwin do is say to the masses of people, you have no role in history. You are what the ruling class says of you. We, who are apologists for the white supremacist social system, and we who are privileged, as it were, we make history, not you. And we have established in no uncertain terms the opposite. I don't want to get into everything about the exhibit. I know a lot of people didn't like that the curators of the exhibit had the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in there. They couldn't like that. You understand? I just think, okay, that's all I wanted to say. Forgive me. Because to have the Honorable Elijah Muhammad with Baldwin is to talk about the unity of the oppressed.
Mm. Okay. Did you guys still want to go into the concert as well? Okay.
Yeah, I can start with the concert. It is important that the concert was an Afro-Asiatic peace concert. And it's important because it centers the question of war and peace and puts that on the table as the issue of our times. And it shows an understanding of the crisis of this nation, and connecting it to Baldwin and why Baldwin is relevant, not as someone of anything else, but actually one that spoke about war and peace, the questions of war and peace, and the significance of the civilizations of Afro America and the unity following the destruction of these civilizations and the attacks on these civilizations. And I think what's also significant is that, continuing with what we've all been talking about, is that when people came, it's similar to how Baldwin describes art or music, where you might come here and not know all the technicalities of, I don't know, like playing an instrument or of singing. But what everyone can get is the spirit, the spirit of the performers, and, the heart that they put in and the work that they put in, and the relationship that they're building with the audience. And the reason why I say that, because there's a version of Baldwin that isolates people, makes people feel guilty, and makes people feel bad or irrelevant. Where, okay, if I'm not queer, or if I'm not Black, or if I'm not blah, 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 then I'm privileged, then I'm, that I need to bow down in a different way. Or it makes you feel like, okay, like, is this relevant to me? Why, like, is it just this ancient thing that we're just celebrating for the sake of celebrating? But I think the concert and also the 3 days shows actually a Baldwin that makes people feel good. There's a lot that's going on in the world and it's tough, but it makes you feel that you're not alone in that, and that you feel lost in our current society. And it also makes you feel good because there's a room full of people that are going through something similar and are similar in the sense of us being part of this nation that is yet to be born and is struggling. And it makes you feel good because there's people who are trying to stand for something good and bringing people together, in something that's positive, that's uplifting, that's, that centers love as the way out. Because, you hear about war and you hear about all these things that are going on, but rarely, there's this, I mean, we talk about the Marxists and whatever, and it's also robotic in the sense, but where's the heart and the passion of people that can save us all? The way Baldwin is like, it's the passion of a very few, that have held this world together. I think that's like overall, at least, or overall, of the concert and the people that came. And I know even the free school put so much effort into AV, and it's because, this sort of experience you can really, I feel like, only get a sense of in person, the spirit that fills the room. But I know we tried to record it because we knew that this would be something that is important for others to see, even if they can't be in person. And the way it was sectioned in terms of really bringing Baldwin's words and ideas to the fore, because I think a lot of actually what happens in celebrations of Baldwin is that people choose snippets that don't actually give any substance to who Baldwin was and who he or what he says, instead distorts them. But always for us to bring forward, like, what are actually the things that he said and stood for. Baldwin himself, even at the time, was like, I'm not, like, I don't subscribe to this thing of gay. But then other people, I don't talk about, or this is not a confine that I see myself part of, but then it gets distorted. And so really actually in those 3 sections, Take Me to the Water, The Last White Nation, To Crush a Serpent, what is the substance of those ideas? And then for each of the performers to fill that in, to give a creative imaginary where people are able to see those ideas in art, and what that means in terms of a expression of a people. And I think the other thing is that we've worked with some of these performers before. They're both a mix of old and new to the free school. And for the ones that we have known, it was a different kind of performance, because there was a political objective of the issue of war and peace, and of Baldwin, like truly uplifting Baldwin, the Baldwin that spoke of the child, the Baldwin that spoke of love and revolution. And we saw that with Zumbi in the very beginning. We saw that with Bobby, with Alfie. It was a different kind of performance. And then even with the newer performers, I know there were the Chinese opera singers, the Korean dancers, the Palestinians. It was a new formation of the free school and coming together. And I think that I'll leave it at that. But I think just I'm still making sense of it, because we had a certain, I guess, hypotheses, formulation of the concert, but then also to see how the people who came responded, the performers who came responded, is another dynamic. And just for us to always keep that pulse of what they're striving for, how are they responding, how are they thinking of things, making sense of the world.
Yeah, I think the structure of the concert was my favorite part. But like the Take Me to the Water, Last White Nation, and then To Crush a Serpent. Just to add to what you're saying, Alice.
Yeah, could people who came up with the titles, could you say, like, what was the thinking behind the different titles of the different portions of the concert?
I can be very brief and then someone can add on. But the concert also represented the continuation of the documentary. Really, this focus on chronology. What is the story of America that actually gives people a sense of where they fit in America? And so really, I think across the 3 days, there was that lockstep of the documentary, the concert, the exhibit. What is the chronology? And so with that, it gets to the 3 sections of Take Me to the Water, Last White Nation, To Crush a Serpent. Definitely, Serafina, you can jump in on this.
No, I mean, what's funny is that it was me, Michelle, Purba, Doc, Emily, you. Who else is in that room? When we were trying to figure out the names for the concert. So it's kind of like an interesting process where we're thinking of what was right. What is the political imperative, I suppose, of the section? And also, like, I think Doc, I'm gonna hook you into this, because the question is like, well, why did we have this kind of arrangement for the concert? And then why did we pick the people who were in each section, like Bobby or Cyrus or Sumi, or like the Chinese opera or the Korean drummers and dancers, like in the particular sections, which I might not be able to say to the exact point. But I think it's an important point because the concert was a new kind of concert. I think we've done intercivilizational concerts before. And the title, the difference between the intercivilization and the Afro-Asiatic is really, for me, something to do with the spirit, something to do with a different kind of dynamic. But it has nothing to do with the essence of the thing, which is to say something about, like what Emily brought up earlier, civilization, or what you had brought up earlier, Doc, genealogy, like struggle. So I guess there's a lot of ways to say that, but I don't think I'd say everything.
Yeah. Well, you know, we had a discussion over whether we should call it an intercivilizational concert. And, you know, we decided, no, it should be Afro-Asiatic peace concert. And already that, I think it had a big role to play in focusing the artists themselves. I think all of whom had in one or another way an investment in the concept of Afro-Asia. And for them, it was, and for everybody, I think it was a term, a concept that hadn't been heard for decades. You know, of course, the postmodernists, the liberals, the you know, they don't want to hear that. But the concept, which I think fits the moment that we're living in, the unity of Africa and Asia and the descendants of these two, these civilizations are at the core of the fight for peace. And I think that still resonates. I think the concept still stands up. It harkens back to Bandung. It harkens back to all of the great revolutions of the 20th century. And it places Baldwin politically and ideologically where he was. Because I think we say, where did we say? I think in the documentary, we talk about Du Bois, the father of modern Pan-Africanism and of the civil rights movement. People don't understand when Kwame Nkrumah said that Du Bois is the father of Pan-Africanism, what he meant is Du Bois is the father of the modern African liberation movement. That's what he meant. And then, of course, with Asia and the Chinese and Indian revolutions and all of that, and the wars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing is, I think we started out with 4 categories, and we ended up with 3. And I forget how we discussed all of that out. But each category of performance was associated with Baldwin's writing. And I think that was very innovative because usually we would just have people performing. And now we had to think, where does Bobby fit? Where does Alfie fit? Where does Osiris fit? What about the Palestinians? What about the Chinese opera, by the way, my favorite of the whole show. So all of this had to be organized in an artistic, political way, but also organized around Baldwin's writing. What was the first section called?
Take Me to the Water.
Take Me to the Water. Then
The Last White Nation.
The Last White Nation.
And then To Crush a Serpent.
To Crush a Serpent. and they were all from Baldwin in an Afro-Asiatic peace concert. You see what I'm saying? So it was multidimensional in its conceptualization and in its aesthetic, but it did not separate the aesthetic from the political and from the challenges of this moment. And that's what we're trying. I hope everybody kind of got all of that. I know the artists performed in ways that suggested that they understood perfectly what it was about.
Actually, to Crush the Serpent section of the concert, when it happened, it seems to be more interesting to me now because of the political question that we're raising, which has to do with what is the struggle forward, like it can, like, because I feel like throughout the concert we are raising something about making America the last white nation, something about the Black freedom movement. Is it relevant? How can we, but To Crush the Serpent was interesting to me, to see the Palestinians, because I think that the Palestinians were taking it in a Black context rather than a white context. And I think that Alfie and Jaleel were interesting because Jaleel is like a contemporary, like he is known and validated. But Alfie, even with his history of playing with important people, is less validated. But what's interesting about how the arrangement is that we justified that invalidation that is usually, and not really like invalidation, because I know Alfie would play, and but it's something about how we made the concert that made the relationship with Alfie make sense, where it's Alfie that Jaleel or whatever come from rather than the other way around, which was important to just for me, because I think that when it comes to music or art in general, like, is it bad that it's political? Like, I think that's like a major, that's like, if you're not political, then you can just kind of make it in a certain world. But since we're making it political, then we're dealing with music for the people or whatever. But I just wanted to say that. Not really.
Well, I think we're also we're kind of the Afro-Asiatic Peace Concert was also our way of. There's something that I think not a lot of people pay attention to with Baldwin, which is what Doc was referring to with the documentary, that Baldwin understood the Black freedom struggle, like the struggle of Black people for freedom, as humanity's struggle for freedom. And in particular, like the Black freedom struggle belongs with the world anti-colonial movement. And I also think a lot of what we were showing was the way Baldwin says, well, I'm not convinced that America was a white nation from the get-go. Like, I'm not convinced that anyone here is actually white. But other people are insisting that they're white. Like this thing of like America, who said that America is a nation, or who even said, like, on what authority is America considered a white nation? Because the people, and I think the fact that the performers who performed this concert very much, I think, were evidence that this is not a white nation. In fact, like, this is our common human inheritance. And how can you see these performers and not feel proud to basically be a human being, and be part of like human civilization? Like, this is what has to be defended, not whatever the ruling elite insists that we defend. But I think like the section titles, Take Me to the Water. We also talked a lot about how Take Me to the Water, of course, is that famous Negro spiritual, but also the concept of water, like the importance of water in terms of water, whether it represents the Middle Passage, like the transatlantic slave trade in the Atlantic Ocean, but also water as a symbol of renewal, the source. That we're saying, like, the source is the Black freedom struggle. Like, we have a source of renewal for the transformation of us as a people and the transformation of the nation. And then the last white nation, like, to assert, kind of like what Serafina was saying, like, really explicitly saying Baldwin is political. Baldwin's vision was the last white nation. That doesn't mean, and that means something about the basis or the foundation or the orientation of society. Like, will it be oriented around the child or oriented around this like false myth of whiteness? Because Baldwin says, he's like, if we were to actually reorient society around real freedom, which is Black freedom, freedom for all people, which means freedom for all people because everyone's freedom is linked to the freedom of Black folk, then we would be supporting the Palestinians, not Israel. We would be supporting the freedom fighters in South Africa, not apartheid in South Africa. And like, that's way, Baldwin flips everything on its head. Like, if we actually did care about democracy, we would be supporting, again, the Palestinians. We would not be in a war with China. Like, and then To Crush a Serpent, like Serafina was saying, it was beautiful because To Crush a Serpent is also Baldwin's last essay. And to identify the serpent as American empire, the serpent as a civilization that is old and on its way out, and a new world can be born, but it takes us to make that choice to transform ourselves and to achieve the country in of itself. And so that's why we ended with the Palestinians and then Alfie in particular. And I think I was also heading into the concert. I was like, oh, I really hope, like, I hope that vision works out. And I think there's something, I agree with Doc that Saturday and even Monday at the Free Library, you got the sense from various performers that, like, there was an investment in a future, like, to say there was an investment in the future of peace, which is to say humanity, like darker humanity as representing a humanity in becoming or something of like that struggle for peace, like that like our common, and it's like the way Du Bois says in Russian America, he was like the common objective of the people. And it's something that the ruling class deliberately produces propaganda against, is the common objective of humanity as a whole, humanity becoming, is peace and development. Why? Because everyone is concerned about the child.
Yeah, and wait, I want to say, like, I know we'll probably get into it when we start talking about the DNC, but something is like really, like when in the first day of the documentary screening, a woman came into the Church of the Crucifixion, and she was like, I'm from Harlem. I was born in the same Harlem hospital that Baldwin was born in. And that's when I looked at, what was it? Maybe Emily, she said something. And then I don't know if I said it to Purba too, but I was like, it's about to be different. Like, something about this next 3 days are about to be very, like, I think that's the thing that Jeremiah is saying about like the events. And I guess when I get here, I finally like went up this emotional peak, and now I'm kind of like realizing the landscape. But what I'm saying, to be specific, is like I think what the events, like the purpose of doing events in free school is to work out the political questions that we're thinking about. What do we need to focus upon? Like, why did we need to go so into Black Reconstruction? Like, or like all these things, like Korea, like Africa, like this, and like I'm reflecting on what Doc said earlier, like the makings of free school went into this 3-day event or whatever. I'm just trying to be brief, but I just wanted to add to what you said, Emily. Like, I think there's like something that was turned on, or something that we're hitting on, or because we've hit on it so much that it broke to a certain extent, or it's breaking. And I don't, and I only want to say that because I think that during the concert we went on a journey, a certain journey together, like, and in the second section, the last white nation, it was really interesting because the sun was out. There's a lot of children. because of, you know, the Chinese and Korean dancers had also brought families. And there was a certain level when Magna cut the watermelon and everybody started eating watermelon, that there was like a certain festivities about that, about those few hours, I guess, of the last white nation. And then, like, but that only happened because we got taken to the water. Like like Bobby and everybody, like we got brought somewhere, and then, you know, I mean, and so, but that's only to say something about the Crush of Serpent. The feeling changed too in those hours. Like it started to rain when the Palestinian opera singer Farouz started singing and crying. Like that was insane to me. Yeah, and you know, like, so I think it was special that we went on a journey together. That's all I wanted to say about that.
I want to speak to what I was able to connect with the audience and connect with the concert during the last White Nation. So interestingly, when I just went to the bathroom because I just want to go to the bathroom, and people were like so eager to talk to me while waiting for the bathroom, and what the strong sense that I got was there people in Philadelphia and attending the concert were looking for this basis to connect with other human beings. And I mean, there's a lot of things in the way of that in this city. I mean, you have to worry about your safety or just a general distrust of other human beings. And like a human, there was a substance for human connection that I felt opened up as a result of this concert. And really importantly, this concept of the last white nation and all of these performers that like the Korean or the Chinese performers, I think really opened up a lot of people in that, for example, people were really trying to understand what the free school was and just who I was as a person, because I think they were trying to find a way how they could personally connect to what they're witnessing in a substantive way. Obviously there's this feel good way of, wow, you know, this performance was so nice, that was so beautiful. But I think they were looking for something that they could really grasp onto and make it their own. And so they were trying to get a sense of who I was to see how I related to these performers and what you would call Afro-Asian, because they wanted something like that for themselves. And what we showed in the documentary and what Baldwin's life was, I think makes that possible to see that you are like fully connected to this whole world of striving and struggle that we could see concretely in the performances. And you know, I was trying to find a way to say that without being redundant or make it clear what they couldn't get before. And you know, like for myself, I started what made me want to live a life of struggle was reading Huey P. Newton's autobiography. Other people, I think, came through many different paths, and I guess, yeah, it was a little clearer to me as well that this whole of the struggle for freedom of Black America can take you in so many different ways and connect you to all struggle in the world. And you know, when trying to convey certain ideas, you know, I want to find the right words so that people can connect to what I guess I'm trying to live my life about and what I think their lives can be. And I guess it takes a little bit of weight off my shoulders to say, you know, if I obviously should do my best, but there's all these different paths, and with an earnestness and a striving for the truth, it's possible for you to really grasp this entirety of what we've been working on for years here, because there is a connection. If I can just make it concrete and personal to you in some kind of way, all this whole world becomes at your disposal. And what really stood out to me as well, especially in this regard, actually, was the opera singing. Oh man, that was beautiful, man. I shed real gangster tears for that performance. and I had a really good conversation with the Palestinians afterwards, and it brought them a great joy for me to say this, and they even wanted to connect on Instagram, and I'm not really on Instagram, but I was like, let's do it. When I said that this opera singing, I had never taken opera singing very seriously. I thought it was kind of uppity and dramatic, but my personal touchstone was, I connected it to my experience with Mexican muralism, where through struggle, you can appropriate something, anything from the world, even something from Europe that was not meant for you and might have even been directly opposed to you. But through the struggle for freedom, you can make it your own. It can embody the essence of your people and be in service to them and in service to humanity. And so yeah, I think that brought them like great joy, because I think it also made them feel even more connected to the entirety of the concert, because they came early and they saw this other beautiful performers. And yeah, I think it gave that spirit to the room. And it even I've sent them this portrait from Siqueiros, which is a proletariat mother, which speaks to the kind of anguish that the woman and the mother faces in struggle against oppression. And so yeah, I thought this was beautiful.
Well, I wanted to say, like, I think with every event that we organize, like, what becomes more and more clear is the political practice of the free school. And I think this event really, like, clarified some of it, like, because it was so concrete in some ways, I feel, because, like, and this echoes what, everyone has been saying, that like what this event showed was, to me, that we were really trying to like reach the broadest possible unity among the American people here, because it is true that there were many people who came for different, like different parts of the whole 3 day event. Some people came just to see a new documentary on Baldwin. Oh, I want to see all Baldwin documentaries, that kind of stuff. Some people did come to see the concert, or the exhibition, or whatever. But the main idea, that like that really stood through, was that these, like all these people who came, really, I think they got to know something about the free school, and like why we are trying to do this event, like what celebrating Baldwin in this way means. And in some ways, I was thinking of, Doc, what you just mentioned a while back about the the fact that we can't really separate the aesthetic from the political, from from the revolutionary. And I think, and I'm not sure, but it seems like, I think in revolutionary times, as we get closer to revolutionary times, the aesthetic is always transformed. Like it's always brought to a new stage. And this transformation does happen because you cannot separate it from the revolutionary. And this is, I think, what the the concert and the documentary, the whole event exhibition, it does represent, because in many ways, it was like the documentary and the concert, it was very, it was very aesthetic. Like we have been talking about how it was like a professional documentary. It really was. But like it was professional and aesthetic because it was true. And to see Baldwin's life like that is, I think, it's very counterintuitive to, well, to a lot of people in our generation, I would say, because we have really gotten used to the white idea of what an autobiography is, which is, to the question of the individual and the human being. But to see, like, and this comes from not just Baldwin, but what he represents, the black struggle. It comes from Du Bois, and the idea that an autobiography of of a concept, of ideas, of a people, and I think it became more and more clear that what we're trying to do to celebrate Baldwin through even through a peace concert. I mean, I don't think I've ever heard of something like a peace concert in the last in my lifetime. I don't think any of us have. It's something we think about the past, but the fact that a peace concert is needed today and people could see it. People who came to the concert and the other days of the event, they could see that what we're trying to do is not it's not to show Baldwin the way we see Baldwin just like that, but really to say that this is the real Baldwin who belongs to the American people right now. And what stands in our way is all of these, the ideological attack on Baldwin, to see to isolate him into the most useless parts, that in the most useless read of Baldwin you can think of. I mean, useless, but very profitable, I imagine. But this is the task, I think, that we set ourselves up to. And in many ways, the response that we got was, yeah, I think it was very overwhelming to see all the people who came, like a lot of new people who came on every single day of the event. And yeah, to see to see how people responded to the concert, especially. And I was actually thinking, I don't know if this is what went into the thinking behind the titles of it, but it seems so clear that what we're trying to do is let's go, let's walk with Baldwin, let's see where Baldwin takes us. And this is where he does take us to the he does take us to first accept the fact that our standards or our assumptions of who we are and what America is, this must be questioned. And when it is questioned, we do see that the possibilities of a new people is it's right in America. And then the task of what we are setting ourselves up for, and we, as in not the free school, but also as the American people at this point. So it was very, yeah, I think it was in some ways very reaffirming that what we are doing, it is taking us forward. That this is the task we set ourselves to, and people are responding. And I was thinking of this regarding the political practice, because this is antithetical almost to to what what the practice of the left is. Because we, while the left is trying to establish, it almost sometimes seems that the left is trying to speak to an activist class, and what we are trying to do is to establish a relationship with the people. And that's where the whole, the multi-dimension of the black struggle comes in, the music, and the music and the poetry, and love as a state of consciousness which you can't get to unless you see what war is. And it was, yeah, and I think people saw, when we're talking about love, we are talking about love for the Korean village, and Vietnam, and for America. So it was very, yeah, it was very it made a lot of things very concrete for me. So I want to say that.
Yeah. Well, what you were saying, even because I've been thinking about this as people were talking, but it's like, in some ways, part of what free school does is like, what does it look like when a documentary is more than a documentary, or like when a concert is more than just a concert, or an art exhibit is more than just an art exhibit, at least in the terms of how it's currently construed and presented and understood within American society today. And yeah, I feel like part of in some ways, almost like the puzzle that the concert like put forward or the question that the concert put forward is, you know, we frame, you know, the celebration of Baldwin and the concert and all the different parts of the celebration as part of this task, like you're saying, of achieving our country, of achieving America, America that has not yet been realized yet. And so people, I feel like, might ask, like, oh, like, why not call your concert American, like an American concert, an American peace concert? And yeah, because I was even thinking about that, and I think part of it is that this is just another way of saying what others have already said, but that the Afro-Asiatic peace framing of it, it's like saying America is not complete without humanity, without world humanity. And part of what our task was to be like, yeah, humanity will come pouring through this concert. And there is no America without world humanity. And this is in part what was achieved and discovered even with the civil rights movement, which was, you know, I think we've talked about it before, but one way you can understand the civil rights movement is as almost an Afro-Asiatic remaking of America. Um, and yeah, especially in this moment when, like, one way that you can understand the changes in the world today is the Afro-Asiatic remaking of the world and of the world's population and of kind of not just the centers of power, but of the basic makeup of even like the world system and all that stuff, is through, yeah, like, again, like the Afro-Asiatic remaking of the world and of humanity. It's like, yeah, the part of the question is like, where do the American people fit into that world historic change, that change of epochs? And part of what we're saying is that this whole Afro-Asiatic thing is not something which is external to the American people, but is part of the remaking of the American people too. And yeah, I think the other thing that I was thinking about as people were talking is, you know, like I really like that phrase. I guess I forget who said it, but it's like, you know, freedom being the recognition of necessity. Um, and I guess the way that Baldwin frames it in the documentary that people made was, you know, Baldwin is like, I am only ever free in struggle. Like, I'm only ever free to struggle. And I think, like Shambarto was saying, part of what I think is becoming clear in this time is that, like, I guess it's like the question of like, yeah, like which artist is free in America today? Are there any artists who are free in America today in the way that Baldwin would say it? And in some ways, what was revealed through the concert is that when the artist understands themselves and their work and their relationship to the people through not just like my own expression or even the expression of like quote unquote my culture, whatever that means, but like you understand it through a task, the task of whether it's peace, whether you frame it as peace or the achievement of America, all that stuff, then that's actually the starting place of like even a new qualitative level on the aesthetics level. Or at least the way that you could also put it is that, you know, when Feiruz was singing that opera and basically, as Eddie was saying, turning an Italian opera, I think, into a narrative about a Palestinian mother,
Yeah.
you know, it imbues the quality of this, of her singing and the music and the audience's understanding of the music, like in a new way. And I think that that impacted all of the performers in different ways. And also, you know, also it's like dependent on like how they understand the free school, how they understand the celebration of Baldwin, whether it's Bobby or Alfie. And yeah, just speaking also as like someone who was part of the tech team for this concert, um and basically doing like sound through the duration of the concert. It's like I was saying, it's like we've reached a stage in which a concert is more than just a concert, you know? Doing sound for an event is more than just doing something that's technical or logistical. And it's like I felt like, I don't know, maybe this was just me, but I was like, oh yeah, like even if I don't have that close of a relationship with all the different performers, like in some ways, like I felt like when I was like, like doing like fiddling with all these knobs on like the soundboard and all that stuff and whatever, I was like, oh yeah, like in some ways I'm also a part of what is being achieved here, part of what is being created here. And that relationship also between the artists and the people, the artists and the audience. And I just felt very responsible in a way, but also very lucky to be part of that relationship. And yeah, I think my two favorite parts of the concert, although it's hard to pick, were basically Feiruz's opera performance and then also Alfie's performance at the very end to kind of close the concert. Because I just feel like, yeah, Alfie's one of those people who the Free School has worked with and who's performed a lot at our events, but for some reason this felt like, I don't know, it just felt like there was something like slightly almost new in the way that he was performing and he was playing, and there was a lot of love in it. And I think, especially with people who, whether you perform with Free School a lot or it's your first time, there's, like I was saying, like it could be construed as like just a concert, just a performance, and people don't really have an obligation to give something to us, like to really give of themselves. And like people could kind of phone it in if they wanted to, but I think it means a lot to me, and I think it means a lot to all of us when it's like the artist sees something also in us and what we're trying to do, and like wants to give of themselves basically. And I felt that really strongly with like like the Palestinians and all the performers, but especially with Alfie too, because it felt like he really wanted to give something of himself. And also with Julio playing as well. But yeah, it was just really special, and in some ways it also felt like a historic event, like that concert in particular. And yeah, like I think I'll remember it for a long time. But it felt like something that like made an impact in basically like the lives of all the people who came, whether you were there for the entire event and went on the entire journey, or even if you were just part of it for like certain performances. But yeah, those are just like my thoughts on the concert.
I wanted to add just a small bit. I know we've been talking about the concert, but I think this thing about concretely tying the Black freedom struggle with the peace movement is very important and often overlooked. Often no, completely overlooked. The fact that there is such a strong anti-war sentiment in this country cannot be separated from that courageous moral stand that King took, for which he, against the war in Vietnam, for which he was maligned, but he did it because it was the right thing to do, and because the Black freedom movement was not just about civil rights or racial equality. It was really at the heart, like everybody has been saying, of a world revolutionary struggle against a world system that was rooted in white supremacy and domination, which caused these wars, which, caused so much suffering for dark humanity. And so this connection, I mean, the peace movement was a natural successor of the Black freedom struggle. It was taken up by Coretta. I mean, Robson, all of this, starting from the very beginning to a point where attacks and erasure meant that it lost its momentum with the people. It was a struggle for peace and positive peace, which was not just talking about, oh, let there be no wars, but was talking about, let there be justice. And I think this centrality of the Black struggle, in the spectrum of, the world revolutionary struggle for justice and human dignity, is something that is as important now, even more important now than the moment where Baldwin was speaking to these things. Because if you think about it, if there is a pro-Palestinian movement in America, how can it avoid drawing upon the Third American Revolution, the civil rights movement? There's a reason why these students at the encampments protesting against the genocide sing freedom songs. There is a reason that, the marches that are organized go to Lincoln Square where King spoke. And I think these things can be taken in a very symbolic way, or it can be made concrete. And I think the concert, one of its great achievements was that it managed to make these things very concrete, so that you walked out believing in what King said, that there is a world house, there is a single garment of destiny in which all of us are tied together. And if there is a struggle for peace today, it has to draw upon the Black freedom movement, it has to draw upon King and Baldwin. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, if it's okay, I just want to say something real quick. Um, so my favorite part of the concert was either the first section or the last section. Um, but I thought, not just like a wonderful celebration, but I feel like it was a wonderful education, uh, that concert, because I feel like one of the questions that we ask ourselves is like, what is it going to take to produce a people um, capable of taking up the struggle, capable of making these sacrifices, and all of that. And I felt like, especially just even with the last section, starting from um, like the spirituals or like the sorrow songs to Alfie and Jalil, I feel like that took an important that especially drove home for me, at least, the importance of needing to go from of having that, I guess, in your mind, of having that chronology and having that struggle, I guess. Because when I think about it, like what produced a Baldwin, what produced a Du Bois or a King, is they each had their songs from their generation. Du Bois talks about the sorrow songs. Baldwin talks about the sorrow songs and the blues. For our generation, we can talk about the sorrow songs, the blues, and the rhythm and blues and jazz. And, progressively, I mean, we're reaching towards something, or reaching towards freedom, I would say. And, we have more and more to build off of, thankfully, to those people. And I just feel like, yeah, that really drove home to me just the sort of timeline that we're on, and the sort of education that's needed, because that's going to be what's needed, because people have to have that in their consciousness. And to me, like, for every event, honestly, like I always enjoy, like I always think the panels and the discussions are very important. But what always drives everything home to me is always the music and the dance. That always completes it to me and makes it understandable, because you see what those things produce. You see that.
Um, I'm I'm just thinking in terms of like, even our conversation here right now, how I think something earlier Serafina had said, which is a power or a description of a power or an engine, or a source of revival and creativity. And even actually hearing everyone talk about the event, like something feels qualitatively different about us. And I think that's significant because whenever Free School like puts so much work into these events and brings it to the people, it's not in a patronizing or didactic way to the people. And I think the way that this comes out is that we also are learning from the people and changing in the process. And actually, this is probably unprofessional of me, but as people were talking, I was just getting so emotional because you can see how people are shining and are still making sense of the concert and what it means for us and Free School moving forward. Like, how does this event change us too in relation to the people? And I think that's the other piece too, which is that we talk about a ruling elite that has no creative force moving forward, or force and source moving forward. And the concert even talking about Afro Asia reminds me of something Baldwin has said, or both Baldwin, but also Jeremiah, where America will not be complete or will not be able to move forward without world humanity. The West that has in history continuously preached this white supremacist view of the world, that it is the beacon of progress. It has everything to offer the world. But actually, by us centering Africa and Asia and the Black freedom struggle that connects to Africa and Asia, or Afro-Asia, this is us saying that those will now be the engines moving forward, that there is something to learn from Africa and Asia and from Black America. These civilizations that have been kicked to the curb. And that will be our way forward in this moment. And yeah, so I'll just end there.
Okay, maybe we can move to the final portion of the celebration, the art exhibit. I know a lot of people worked on it, but especially like Kathy, Blaze, Nuri as well were really involved. Serafina, I know, was also involved. Yeah, if you guys want to talk through that.
Me too. Well, it's been really hard to keep up with like how much we're processing and how many. Actually, I think there was a lot of emotions that obviously all 3 days really stirred up for me. And I think it's been really, really helpful to hear how all of it comes together. And I really feel like this is an event. These 3 days really flowed so perfectly into one another. Really, really, really helped to like cross fertilize the ideas and just become like one. I feel like continuous. I feel like message or narrative that we were telling, and so yeah, there was something I think really, really special that we achieved. I think and I just felt really lucky to say that like the third day, Monday, August 5th, the opening of the exhibition at the Free Library could be like the third and concluding day of this series of events honoring James Baldwin on his 100th birthday. And I feel like we've already kind of dove into this, but I feel like as I was trying to prepare to sort of like start to process or think about what that day or what the exhibit represented and what the whole endeavor of working with the Free Library and having such a beautiful opening ceremony and having Osiris and Tahimba, a drum ensemble, play for us in the lobby, and for us to have so many people come to see this exhibition and to hear our tour. I really feel like we've already kind of explored this, so I don't want to like repeat, but I do think that this notion that James Baldwin belongs to the people is something that just kept coming back to over and over again. And by extension, like the Free Library and all these civic institutions that should belong to the people, but don't, like, must be a site of struggle to be remade into palaces for the people, really, really, really got really stuck in my mind as we were talking. There's a lot of reasons for that. And I think one of them is just genuinely that as it was, I think, me, Nuri, Emily, Serafina, Blaze, Shambarta, and Manasvi. Did I mention Emily yet? I mean, like, and many others who had helped in this process, like, as we were crafting this, like, it became really apparent that, yes, we had to go through a lot of different iterations to achieve what we ended up achieving for, like, how it was unveiled on Monday, but it really was something that I think had to be something that was worthy of the people, worthy of Baldwin, and worthy of this moment. And it couldn't be anything short than, I think, the most beautiful exhibition that we could possibly pull off, from the writing to the art, because people deserve beauty. And I think that was something that I think we really pushed ourselves to. I think, as we were saying, so much of what these events have really pushed us to do is to take everything that we have learned and everything that all our experiences, putting together events, putting together exhibitions, but this time qualitatively stretching ourselves and to be able to do something completely different. This was something that I will say I think was not like any. We have done exhibitions before, but this was not like other exhibitions. I think, of course, I think it was the ideological scope of it. We were putting together in our narrative. I think we were trying to, as Free School this year has been able to break so much new ground in like articulating the concept of a people's autobiography, for example, or the Black social system, or like a revolutionary chronology. We were asking ourselves, there's no way to not like depict Baldwin without trying to begin to visualize, conceptualize, talk through, and present to the people what that meant in a very, I think, original sort of sense, or in a sense that like also allowed people to connect so deeply with the essence of the ideas that we were really working through. And so that was one area where I think I feel really proud of us for how we were able to bring all of that to life, and to say that there is no Baldwin without beginning the story at the Middle Passage and the betrayal of Reconstruction and the Great Migration. And we also, and of course, King and the Civil Rights Movement, and that he indeed belongs to the people. And that's where I think the other side of it also, I think, became apparent, that what we were undertaking was not like other exhibitions we had done before, precisely for the complexities, but also like the great opportunity that it represented to work with the Parkway Central Free Library, these two cases that you see when you like walk right into the lobby, go up the marble steps, like meet you right in front of where you land on the top, like the second floor. And for us to have our exhibition there be the first thing people see when they walk up to the second floor of the Free Library was a very, very like serious endeavor, not just because it was all of a sudden like so concrete that what we were doing was injecting, I think, a spirit of Baldwin into a city that's so deserves to, and also so perfectly ripe to celebrate James Baldwin at this time. We have been talking so much about how like it's such a shame that in the city of New York City where Baldwin was born, the Schomburg has put together an exhibition that certainly like unveils his papers that have not been seen on the light of day for all these decades, but like when you go to see his exhibition, first of all, it's called Jimmy God's Revolutionary Black Mouth. I think almost like in a way that I think too closely parallels what we do, that I feel like we could have a conversation about just that. But also I'm curious if, Nuri will maybe speak later about her experience seeing that exhibition, but to say that it was nothing like, I think, the originality or the significance of actually bringing to life Baldwin the revolutionary, Baldwin for our times, Baldwin a prophet for love and revolution, which is why I think we had to go as hard as we did. And so that obviously, I think, opened ourselves up to, I think, a lot of directly facing the headwinds of what we're talking about in terms of the distortion, the misappropriation of Baldwin being in such a prominent and public place. I don't want to get overly into, I guess, the details, but I do think it is important to say that in the lead up of installing the exhibition, we were receiving, I think, pretty pointed ideological feedback too about what was what I think when it was like the live, I think, embodiment of when somebody like wants to celebrate a very like misappropriated version of Baldwin that in some ways ultimately reveals more about how they're celebrating themselves more so than celebrating the real Baldwin, or even that if Baldwin is to be severed from
the Black struggle, the struggle of for like achieving our country, then that is an affront to like the forces of identity politics, of like of queerness, and in some ways is it was very revealing in all these different layers, because it was just so odd to me that, like, of course the training that you receive in a place like a university is that identity politics is to say, like, oh, the Black struggle is only for Black people, the queer struggle is only for queer people, but to actually assert that actually because of what we're saying and what we have been able to establish through the centrality of the like being able to see like this revolutionary chronology that dates back to the anti-slavery struggle, and through the failure, but then also the efforts of Reconstruction, and then of course the Third American Revolution and the Civil Rights Movement. Like, the Black struggle has always been about the liberation of all people, of all humanity, and that is something like that is erased or sidelined or intentionally, deliberately, I think, distorted through, I think, the lens of identity politics. It was something that we had to, I think, assert very full-throatedly. And the beautiful thing is that I think in the fact that this was something we were dealing with and thinking about in the very moments leading up to the opening of the event itself, it actually meant a great deal to actually see all the people that came to the opening of the exhibition, and how eager all of these ordinary people, so many ordinary Black folk, came to this exhibition, came to the Free Library that day, heard the music, heard You Speaking Dog, heard our tour, and what Emily was saying previously about, like, when you defend the truth and you defend the Black struggle so firmly, like, that does, I feel like, create the basis for a level of, I feel like, respect or shared ground for us to really meet upon. And every time someone really said, like, thank you for doing this, at first I would kind of like feel a little shy, but then I realized, like, this is exactly, like, actually the reason why Baldwin wrote, or the reason why, like, we were doing this exhibition all along, was for you and for your children and for the people of Philadelphia. And I think it would just really, really help. It just would always really remind me, personally at least, like, what we were doing, and what it was for, and like who really, like, Baldwin, like what we're, like, the year of Baldwin was really for the people. But I really wanted to say that, and just open it up to other folks who are also working on this too, because
sorry, I think my voice is a little hoarse. I'll try to keep it kind of brief because I think I'm still processing it. But we were working on the exhibit for a pretty long time. We technically started in April, and I feel like I didn't necessarily imagine it turning out the way that it did, because we went through a lot of different iterations, and we were basically trying to, I think, stay on our feet and actually try to develop what year Baldwin was picking up. And so I feel like really we started hitting our stride around June. And something that I feel like we were experimenting was how to actually show and flesh out the Black social system that we were talking about. And that was a pretty interesting thing that I think there's a lot more to explore and develop. But I also feel like the other thing that made this exhibit pretty special was, like, working with the public institution of the Free Library. That's something it's not something that can be taken for granted at all. And I feel like I learned a lot of, I think, what ideological struggle really looks like on the ground and in the moment, and having to work with people who are not, like, in free school is a really good and very interesting experience, because I feel like we do things our way for a reason, which is that I feel like we've achieved a certain, like, base we've achieved certain principles that we agree on, and so that defines and shapes the way that we work together. But I feel like the thing is that we as Free School, like, we believe in democracy, like we believe in the democratic struggle, and I feel like that also involves basically developing trust, like developing ways of getting to actually know each other on like a basis of like principles or truth or love. And yeah, I think I realized that I had been in some ways maybe underestimating what it meant for the Free Library to be a partner for the year of James Baldwin starting in February. Because it is like a really central location. And I think people who came to the concert, a lot of them actually came because they saw the Free Library posters. And there are so many people who are part of the city who are stopping by who recognize the Free Library as a central institution. And because of that, I feel like on the one hand, it means so much that we were able to have our exhibit there, but it also means that it is a contested site where people feel in some ways entitled to have their opinions or their views represented. And other people, I feel like, almost don't expect to have their opinions and ideas represented. And I think that was one of the really fascinating things that came out in working on the exhibit. Like, Kathy and I were there for basically 2 whole days on Friday and on Monday. And it was really interesting, like, seeing people come up, like, engage with the cases, like people just floating through the library. And yeah, I feel like I really learned a lot, and I'm honestly still processing like quite a lot of it. But I feel really proud that we were able to ultimately have an exhibit. Like, I don't think that that was something that you could just say like was guaranteed. And I don't think it was a guarantee that we were going to be able to have it on basically terms of integrity or terms of actually trying to say the truth. And I think that was a fight that was worth having. And I also feel like I don't know. I just think it was pretty important. And like, the ideological struggle is not an abstract, like, symbolic thing. Like, it's not. Like, the ideological struggle is real, and you can see it in people. And I think that our exhibit brought out basically what the terms of that struggle are, like what the terms have to be. And I feel like we tried our best to express that and to stand our ground on what is true, like what is actually truthful. And yeah, I also realized that like engaging in ideological struggle does not actually guarantee that you will win all the time. And I think that that was something that is important for me to like process, because I feel like it's basically like a maturing, which is to realize that like if you're going up against like the ruling class, like you aren't necessarily going to win. You can't just impose your will. You have to actually win over the people, and you have to actually make your case. And there's a process by which people have to actually, I think, process and accept certain ideas, and also like come to terms with it for themselves in their own lives. And thinking about the exhibit being up for another 2 months, I think it will spark a lot of conversation, a lot of engagement, and hopefully like reflection, which is that I also think people see Baldwin and assume certain things. And I'm happy that we are having an exhibit that can challenge some of those assumptions. And if that's uncomfortable, so be it. But I feel like we were really trying to struggle for the truth. And ultimately, I hope that people can see that. And I think that the librarians also saw and recognized that we had a vision, and they wanted to work with us to actually achieve that. And that means like that meant so much. It means a lot to me, and I think everybody in the exhibit. And I think like learning to speak and engage with the public is very like it's a very important skill that I think we're learning to develop. And I feel like we've been doing it with all of our events, but this was public in a new way, I feel. So Oh, and then I guess, yeah, I did go to the Schomburg exhibit on Wednesday, and it's at the 135th Street branch. So the Schomburg Center for Research, I think, but that was Baldwin's library. And I think reading more about Baldwin's life and also the Harlem Renaissance, you realize how central that library site was. Like the Aaron Douglas papers are there, like the Aaron Douglas murals are actually there, like 4 panels, and they're just in like one of the library reading rooms. And the exhibit is like not too big. It has its room and it has like very shiny display panels, like touchscreen panels, and they're playing price of the ticket. So you could, and then they also had like Baldwin first edition books and covers and photographs. And so in material, actually, there was a reasonable amount of overlap with our exhibit and actually with our event. Like they chose the Baldwin photo with Medgar Evers. They chose him like in core, like in the South on the core lecture tour. And they also, I think, drew out Baldwin's relationship with Amiri Baraka, Lorraine Hansberry, Maya Angelou. And the strength of that collection is that because it was Baldwin's home library, they have so many of his papers. And it was pretty moving to see his handwriting, like his creative process, and his letters to Maya Angelou and Lorraine Hansberry, sort of processing his arc and how he was facing, like how he was understanding his novels and basically his task. But I think it was almost, I felt like this, they leaned too hard on the strengths of the objects themselves, and to say like, oh, we were Baldwin's like branch and we have his papers and that is enough, without needing to say like really why it's worth celebrating his 100th birthday, why it's worth defending his vision in this time. And so I think, yeah, despite like there are many resources and how they're able to like paint the walls with the photographs and make it look really official, I think I feel proud of our exhibit because of, I think, the effort to actually lift Baldwin up as a revolutionary,
Yeah.
and not do it for the sake of just doing it or to go through the motions, but to actually like live, like basically live out his vision in our own lives. And I feel like that's really the lasting testimony of Year of Baldwin, which is that in taking it seriously, like for myself, I feel like I learn new things. And yeah, so
I think I'm reflecting on the exhibit and the events in 2 main ways. One is the ideas that were presented, and then the second is how those ideas were received and engaged with by the people that attended. While people were talking about the documentary and the peace concert, I was thinking of how much overlap there is between the ideas presented there and the ideas in the exhibit. And I don't think that's an accident. I think it even goes beyond the fact that like these are free school events worked on by free school people and we work closely with each other. But I think it's really a result of engaging honestly with Baldwin and his life and his ideas, with the real Baldwin and not the misappropriation of Baldwin. And if you do that honestly with the purpose of presenting this to people for struggle, then you will inevitably come to these ideas that we came to in each of the events. What produces Baldwin, his origin, and thus why we said "From Whence I Came" is a one of the parts of the exhibit. Baldwin as a revolutionary, not just someone who was on the sidelines. He was actually an active participant. His relationship with King and the Black Freedom Movement, the new chronology that's necessary, the quality and power of love as a revolutionary force, the transforming force. I see so much of these in each part of the event, and I don't think that's an accident. And then finally, of course, the moral choice that Baldwin makes and then leaves us with as well. The second part, seeing how people engage with these ideas and with the events. I think it inevitably becomes so personal for me because I invite family, and then I I have to reckon with how those relationships are transformed as we have a new point of reference with each other after these events. Um, and just to share, I think I shared this with some people, but my uncle Gabe was there, his wife, my aunt Angela, and Uncle Gabe was actually someone who came up to me at a family event a year or two ago at a Christmas gathering and said, "I just want to let you know, I actually blocked you on Facebook because you were sharing things that I just couldn't handle." And it was this time when I was very online, very reactionary before I'd really come into free school. I was very eager to criticize people I thought were politically wrong in a very self-righteous way. And well, he said this to say, I saw something you posted recently, and it was one of those long form free school posts on Instagram with paragraphs and paragraphs of ideas, really thought out and serious. And he said, I just wanted to say I really appreciated what you shared. And he was there at this event and stayed the whole 6 hours. And I think this just shows to me that people are watching, even when you don't know it. They're watching and they're engaging with the quality and the seriousness with which you present these ideas. And that's a great responsibility, but it's also a great joy. I mean, for me personally, to see that. And another way I'm watching the way people engage with these ideas in the events was my mother was at the free library, and at one point, I think it was during Osiris's performance, she turned to me and said, "Did you ever think coming to this library as a kid all those years, going down to the basement to the children's section, that you would see the library in this way?" And I had to say, no, I never did. The way people have already said that it becomes a palace for the people. And it's not just a place to pursue knowledge for knowledge's sake, but knowledge imbued with a moral imperative because of Baldwin's life and his ideas, a knowledge and history that provides a kind of sustenance for struggle. And that was very beautiful to see, and to see that, at least she understood it on that level. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if others have stuff to add, but I just want to, I think, also just congratulate, especially Blaze, Kathy, and Nuri for doing the tour guide or the tour for the exhibit, because you guys did such a great job. And even without knowing all the context of like the actual battle you guys had to do in order to even put the exhibit up, I think a lot that goes on behind the scenes that people don't see. But even in the very public setting of doing the tour, getting pushback or getting questions, getting different points of view, encountering contradictions, encountering disagreement, all that stuff from people who were there. I not only felt very proud of you guys in a free school and where we've been able to go and where we are, but also like the first thought that jumped in my head was like, oh yeah, like in a way what we're doing is nonviolence for a new time. And I think I also believe at the same time that, especially living as we are on the cusp of what could be a new revolutionary period in American history, I think this question of nonviolence is something that will have to be developed and explored a lot more by the American people, but especially with even just the specifics of what we were doing with the exhibit and the rest of the celebration as well. Like the way that we engage with people, the way that we draw people into this new dialogue with each other, with Baldwin, with themselves, with their future. And the way that also it's like, yeah, it's like, we had that, like, I think there was a moment where there's like, because one of the sections is like just about like the Third American Revolution, and like a woman and an older woman was like, oh, like, can you guys just talk about like the Third American Revolution thing? Because like people, I think that's also something we also forget sometimes. It's like people, free school is kind of a world within a world, and we talk about these ideas all the time. And I think I also forget a lot, like, oh, like, it's not just that free school moves fast, but that the ideas that we're working with, it may be someone's first time ever encountering that particular formulation of American history and all that stuff. And yeah, I just thought that the way that you guys responded to people is really beautiful. And also in the way, yeah, and like in the way that like the best like freedom fighters in the civil rights movement, in that spirit, like almost even disarming ideologically with love, people who may either come with bad faith or may just come with their own assumptions and are trying to project their own kind of ideas and agenda onto something. And yeah, like I think like even just generally, part of what I've been thinking about coming out of this event is like the next issue of Avant-Garde, which we're dedicating to Baldwin, which I think will draw a lot on this celebration of Baldwin. And part of, I feel like the criteria that Free School has achieved is not like, oh, like, can we just do a good job of capturing all of these ideas and like kind of writing it correctly and all that, but even the criteria that Baldwin gives you as a writer, as someone who's engaging with the people, is like, actually, like, can you pierce the human heart? Like, can you actually pierce through people? And I think that's a very difficult thing, but it's also a necessary thing, whether it's in the context of like this exhibit, whether it's in the context of the music and the performances in the concert or the documentary. I think that we're setting a high standard for ourselves, but it's a standard that needs to be there. And part of it is like, as people have been saying, we don't celebrate Baldwin because we feel like it, or because we like, or even just because like we like Baldwin a lot. It's not like we're just like fans of Baldwin who are like just wanted to do this, but it's because we see a necessity for Baldwin for this time. And Baldwin answers a necessity in American history and burning questions for the American people in this time. And we're trying to do our best to do justice to that and to honor that, and to make that real for people, and to make it something that they can grapple with, and that it's within their capacity to grapple with that, and to work through it with others. And so, yeah, I don't know, just in general, like I'm really proud. And yeah, like, I mean, everyone who worked on the event, but yeah.
Can I say, just because I know this is going on and I don't mean to continue the role, but what I'm feeling is that it's true that we feel more confident, which is not to be taken lightly, to be honest. I don't know if all of us at the same time have realized our strengths, like really, or at least have seen what can be done, what we can do. So I just wanted to add that to what you're saying, Jeremiah, because that is also an unraveling. It's not something that would just be like, oh, since we have it, oh wow, like we can just fuck around or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's a thing like, well, what is the untapped potential, and then how can we better hone in, move forward, like you're saying with Avant-Garde, or with the upcoming 5 months.
Really quick, even with Avant-Garde, this is to, I think, Eddie's point earlier, which is that as people are watching the concert, the documentary, like people were asking, like, who is the Free School and how do I learn more? And the way in which they did it was they came up to the table too and asked, like, for T-shirts, but also for Avant-Garde. Like, they're like, does this show like what Free School's thought is? and we actually sold a ton of avant-gardes through that. But anyways, that's a side note.
Quick point as well. I had a really interesting conversation with someone after the exhibit, and they really wanted to talk to me about Fred Hampton, which, at first, I was like, some people do come because they have a lot of thoughts and ideas, and they just, want to talk to people, they want to connect to people, and they're not necessarily, I don't know, connecting with what we're putting out there. It doesn't happen often, but I was just like, maybe maybe unhealthy skepticism. But I finally understood towards the end of what they were trying to get at, which for them, that was a concrete reality of a unity of a people. Because the way they talked about Fred Hampton to me was how he was trying to bring together coalitions of different races of people, essentially, and kind of in their words, which I think was for them how they're from their lived experience, a touchstone for what we were trying to get at with Baldwin, of this completeness of a human being and the oneness of a people. And so I think the exhibit was a great service to the people of Philadelphia, to put these kind of ideas on the table so that people have something that they can reference and think about that I don't see anyone else doing. And two, I think it does put the mandate, similar to what Jeremiah was saying about what he wants to do in avant-garde, to make these ideas real for this time, and as real and concrete as possible in the lives of the people of Philadelphia or wherever we are. And based off of my conversation, that's what people are looking for.
I know. I was talking to people. By the way, I met Blaze's mother there. We were standing beside each other. She said, "I'm Blaze's mother." And I said, "Your son ain't no joke." Like that. But, I had some friends there, many friends there. And you all, I think, met Jasmine and her husband, Sydney. And, Jasmine just recently lost one of her sons who died. But she was so inspired and so overjoyed and happy with the exhibit, but really with, I think, the way she described the free school, and that we were putting this on, and how could you all do this? And unbeknownst to me, she was familiar with the free school because somehow she has followed us on Facebook and so on, and she saw various of you, and she said, "Oh, I'm meeting a star," But Jasmine is a working class woman. Her husband, Sydney, is a worker. And their response said a great deal to me. And then there was Karen Smith, the drummer. She was overjoyed. My daughter-in-law and one of my grandkids were there. I didn't know they were coming. I was so happy. They were filled with joy. And I agree with everybody. The response of the people cannot be taken lightly, because that's a way of people saying, continue to do the work you're doing. I can't come to everything, but you have my support. And that's deeply meaningful. I was texting with Kathy this morning about the exhibit, and I was thinking that maybe we should think about having tours of the exhibit where we have, people from different places, like from Zion Baptist Church, from Mosque 12, from other community organizations, that we would have special tours that, we would set up the special time, and you all would explain the exhibit to them, and maybe we could connect such tours with showing the documentary. And I think we could get, a room in the library to do so. But throughout these next several months that the exhibit would be up, I think it would be very worthwhile to take people on tours, even people who were at the original thing. So I just would like to suggest that, and maybe because the exhibit is worth seeing. It is so educational. It has elements of of Baldwin's life that are hardly mentioned, especially the depth of his relationship to the freedom movement.
Yeah, and I guess if anyone is watching who is in Philadelphia or near Philadelphia, would highly encourage people to go see the exhibit in person. And you can also reach out to us, I guess, if you are interested, if we end up doing those extra tours. But does anyone else have other thoughts they wanted to add about like the event or the exhibit? Okay. Well, Doc, maybe we can move to the DNC then, if you wanted to talk about it.
And just quickly and briefly, as you know, we're in the throes of an unusual presidential political moment in the history of the country. There's not a great deal new to talk about right now, but we're in the calm before the storm, and there will be multiple storms in this election. And perhaps the inauguration, finally, of this political campaign will be the Democratic Party convention, which starts not this Monday, but the next Monday and goes into Thursday. More than anything else, it will be a coronation of Kamala Harris and her vice presidential pick. They've already virtually voted on her. This party is the least democratic party, maybe one of the least democratic institutions in the country. And they're going to try to steamroll this thing. There are many obstacles facing them, which they don't want to talk about. Of course, the threat of a great regional war because of Israel and its, actions and threats to the whole region, to international law, and even to world peace. The blood of Gaza is on their hands, and they can't escape it. A smile and a joke and a kind of sophisticated speech is not going to get it. But this, and just I'll end here, the great political challenge in this upcoming 90-some days is what will Black people do and what will workers do. These groups are intersected, can't be really separated. We know labor leaders and Black leaders, so-called Black leaders, have thrown all of the weight that they have behind the Democratic Party without any serious challenge to them. We just don't yet know. This is going to be a period of sharp ideological struggle, and certainly, we'll be a part of it, but they're going to try to just push this through, to unite the ruling class and all of its institutions, and on the basis of this unity, to try to mobilize the people for the next few months or 90 days, and then on November 5th, deliver victory for the neocons and neoliberals. Let me just say one thing. It's something I was discussing, texting with Jeremiah. Wilmer Leon is a very good friend of mine, as you know, and a friend of the Free School. And he has a podcast, and I would suggest maybe you all might like to look at it. And he had a very smart guy named John Jeter on. And it showed really the weaknesses of what in some ways is called the black left. And they, were talking about how the Democratic Party had undermined itself going back to Bill Clinton and by abandoning black people and Jesse Jackson's attempt to reorganize the Democrats on the basis of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal coalition, and how rather than go with Jesse, the Democrats went with Bill Clinton, and on and on and on. And what they were suggesting in the end, that Trump is so odious that in spite of the Democratic Party having betrayed black folk and labor, that we had no choice but the lesser of evils. And that's just a totally unacceptable and cowardice position. And they come off as liberals who can't leave the plantation. And like, dogs that have been beaten continually, they always crawl back to their abusers. And they don't see, they just don't see a way to say no or can't say no. I was asking myself, because Garland Nixon used to regularly have me on his podcast, but I'm not on there anymore. And I was thinking to myself, well, he probably thinks that I'm too pro-Trump, and it was affecting I don't think his listeners, but podcasts are not just a way to spread information, it's a way to make money. These are entrepreneurial occupations or enterprises. But here we are. The polls are not conclusive, although there is a New York Times Siena College poll that came out today, which shows a real bump for Kamala Harris. Is this a honeymoon or not a honeymoon? Will it be sustained? But at any rate, as they say, all hell is about to break loose. It is hard to predict how this election will turn out. One thing is for certain, some things are not going to change. And I think Gramsci's notion of an interregnum, it remains that. 70% of the American people, of course, say that the system has to be changed or overthrown. And there are two other things that I just mentioned. One, that the national debt, the government debt of the United States reached $35 trillion about a week and a half ago. It was announced. This is on a gross domestic product. The whole economy is 25 trillion. So the debt is $10 trillion or more greater than what the country produces. There are historians who say, as is the case with the United States, where interest on the national debt is more than is spent on the military budget. And most students of empire say, when this happens, this is always a sign of the final undoing of an empire. And the last thing is, as we all know, and it keeps me up at night looking at YouTube and other outlets of news, that we are on the cusp of what could be a world war. This is no joke. Israel, the so-called Jewish state, and I remind everybody that there are hardly more than 16 million Jews in the whole world. And on whose authority are they going to take 8 billion people into world war? This is very serious, very dangerous. The Israeli people, the Israeli nation are psychopaths. When King talks about love is the sword that heals, the Jewish people as a people need love more than any people in the world. And when will their arrogance be broken? When will they join humanity? And I don't think they will, as long as they have the uncritical and just unbelievable support of the US government and the neocons. They're not going to change. Many commentators saying no matter who wins, their power over the US Congress and the US presidency is so great that they own both. They own, how is that? And so since they own both, the threat of war is greater than it has been in over 80 years. We have to face this. That's all I wanted to say. The other thing, I hope, although I can't gauge it, that the protesters are sizable and organized enough to cause some discomfort for the Democratic Party convention. But I don't know how to make a gauge of whether they will.
Yeah, I think, and I'm interested to hear what others think as well. But even the way we talk about Baldwin and how he speaks to this moment, part of the task politically and ideologically is Baldwin was someone who always basically almost like demolished orthodoxies, dogmas, and kind of established ways of thinking and wrong assumptions and all that stuff. And I think it's not really the question of like, oh, what would Baldwin say about this election? But really it's like there are certain kind of really hardly like set, I think, assumptions that some people have, especially political commentators, and people who I guess are part of the left or call themselves part of the left, that I think need to be challenged. The one that I think is very pervasive right now, or I guess there are a few that are pervasive right now, but one of them is that there's this whole narrative that the fault of the Democrats is that they are opening the door to Trump, and that's what's wrong with them. And it's a Democrat, and basically it's the Democrats almost, again, quote unquote betrayal of working people, which opens the door to Trump's populism / fascism, demagoguery, all that stuff. I think that is a wrong assumption and a wrong framing of what's happening in the country.
Yeah.
You may not like, I don't even know if I don't really like Trump at this point, to be honest. But I think it's important to actually be realistic about what's really happening in the country. And the reality also, like, and I'll say another, I guess, very common narrative that I see is that, people will say, oh, Trump and Kamala, for instance, or Trump and Biden are just as bad when it comes to empire. And so still the Democrats are the lesser two evils because at least the Democrats are a little bit better when it comes to domestic policy. I don't know if that's true either. But also it's like, yeah, like that assumes that, you know, this whole thing of that Trump is a threat to like Trump as a threat to democracy, Trump as a threat to kind of the perpetuation of like electoral democracy in particular, all that stuff, most of which I think is basically narratives which have been created by the Democratic Party about, you know, like whether it's like Project 2025, like all this stuff, which I don't think actually bears weight when you actually scrutinize like the claims that are being made about Trump, about like his quote unquote threat to democracy and all that stuff. And but yeah, like I think it's also like a false premise in the sense that like to claim that the Democrats are better even on domestic policy is a misframing even of the question. And it's also like it's also, I think, not just inaccurate, but it's like part of what is even the domestic political crisis in the country. I think it's I guess part of what I'm trying to say is that it's wrong to say that like this question of quote unquote foreign policy is separate from the question of domestic policy, because what's really at the heart of the question is essentially, yeah, the question of empire and the question of a body politic and how it operates within like the overarching kind of historical movement of, yeah, like the collapse of an empire. Yeah. And at this point, it's like empire has been brought home as a domestic question for the American people through basically the crisis of, and it manifests through the crisis of legitimacy of the American ruling class, in the sense that it's like part of the reason why people are even attracted to Trump or to anything like remote, like I think associated with Trump, is because Trump is part of the reason why he ascended in a way that was unprecedented, unexpected, was because he was like, the American elites, and in his own language, is that the American elites have sold you out, and they sold you out in the interest of war, and they're not even interested in governing you anymore, not even interested in honoring any kind of social contract with you. And that's not a foreign question, it's a domestic question, it's a question for the American people. And yeah, like I don't really have like that much, I guess, like faith in like Trump as like a person, as a political agent, as a political actor. I think like he flip-flops on everything. You never actually know what he's thinking. But I think that has to, like, this kind of bifurcation of like, oh, like Democrats good for like domestic politics, and then both Democrats and Republicans are bad on like empire. I think that has to, like, that assumption, that framing of the political crisis has to be actually interrogated and actually pulled apart, because I don't think that actually bears weight in terms of even how the American people are operating and how they're moving in this moment of an interregnum or of a political realignment. And yeah, I just wanted to say that because I think like I see these like kind of assumptions used a lot, and it becomes part of like generic framing of things. But yeah, like even like this whole thing about like Israel, it's like Trump can say what he wants, you know, and he can also like, you know, hug Netanyahu and all that stuff, like whatever. But the reality of it is that it is under the Democrats, together with, I guess, most of the establishment GOP especially, that a genocide is being committed. And I think a lot of young people, I think, are going to have to face a very hard question of, do you mean it when you say like we can't go back? Do you mean it when you say like we can't allow ourselves to be complicit in the genocide? And that includes voting for Kamala. And I know that there are not, I think for a lot of young people, it's like voting for Trump is not really appealing. Like, yeah, for a lot of people, voting for Trump is not really appealing as an option. But I think especially the young generation has to face like actual real hard political questions, but essentially which are also moral questions of like, okay, like you said your moral red line is a genocide. Right now, Israel just bombed 100 people who were praying at a school. That's and right. Like day before they bombed 75 more, they killed 75 more people, and they're committing massacres every day with money that's coming from, yeah, basically this administration. Like I think the US just approved like another, what was it, like $3.5 billion to send to Israel in terms of weapons. And it's like, I guess there's a hypothetical question of what Trump might do, but there's also like the actual concrete reality of like Kamala can say the word ceasefire however much she wants. Netanyahu will also say the word ceasefire, right? Like doesn't like I think people have to also deal with reality in the sense of like, okay, like this is and it's like I think there's a lot of in terms of like I don't know how you can interpret it whether Kamala is more open to like the progressive quote unquote the progressive base, but like I think the reality is that like the Democrats operate and you can say what you want about the GOP about the Republicans, but specifically about Trump, but like concretely the Democrats operate from a position of absolute cynicism. And I
Yeah.
think that I know this firsthand from having again worked in Capitol Hill in Congress as like a lowly intern. But it's like nothing that the Democrats say, especially like when they like basically make all these moral gestures about like, oh, like we care about the Palestinians, we care about whatever. Like none of it is actually real. All of it is spin. All of it is them basically trying to game the and also manipulate like what they see as their base, which is like all these young progressives who are like outraged by the genocide. And what Kamala is betting on is that people will basically be so afraid of Trump, and then also like that like people will be taken in by this whole thing of like, oh yeah, Kamala will say the word ceasefire, and that's good enough. And yeah, and I feel like the reality is that like basically Netanyahu came to the U.S. and came to D.C. to essentially get permission to do what he's doing now, which is trying to start like an actual regional war, which could end up in a world war, by assassinating Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas, doing all these insane things to provoke Iran into a war, which Iran does not want to fight, like an actual full-fledged war that Iran knows that it does not want to fight because it knows the consequences of like an actual war breaking out. And I think people have to actually deal with the political reality of what's happening, and not be just kind of like guided by like what you want to feel comforted by. But yeah.
I wanted to add something that has been very bewildering for me is how, this coup, we talked about this in free school, the deposing Biden and then replacing him with Kamala just like that. How this has not been questioned more, you know? And what does it say? It goes to what Doc was saying, that this shows that this party has basically abandoned all tenets of democratic process and a vision for democracy itself. But more than that, it makes me question, the base that's so excited about Kamala Harris as the person who will deliver this country from the clutches of Trump. I mean, it exposes them for not questioning the really shady manner in which Kamala Harris's nomination came about. And I think this is one of the reasons, because I agree with what Jeremiah was saying, that, Trump's position on Israel is bad. Just like all of them, it's just bad. But I think I have more faith in Trump's base than I have in the Democratic Party base, because Trump's base actually knows what suffering looks like or discontentment looks like. And I think maybe I'll be proven a fool for being optimistic about this, but it's easy for me to believe that from that movement, from that discontent against the American establishment, might arise, a change of heart, a moral transformation where you really put the question of morality at the center. But all these people who are rallying behind Kamala Harris right now with no thought. I mean, they didn't even like the woman, um, you know, 2 weeks back or 3 weeks back, but it just shows intellectual laziness and decadence, where your entire question of what the important, things are, what you have to fight about, are just narcissistic and have to do with self-interest and some, self-defined categories of progressive versus this or that. So, it'll be interesting to see what the DNC talks about, how it positions itself. But I'm really disappointed that there hasn't been more criticism of how all of this came about.
I think with respect to Kamala, and the entire Democratic Party, I think that they only have one argument, uh, which was which was showcased during one of Kamala's recent rallies, which is, "Do you want Trump to win?" That's basically all that they have, because when they are, and Kamala's website, or her official plans with respect to policy or ideas for the American future does not exist. She only has the platform of, "Do you want Trump to win?" Where in a recent rally, when somebody asked her, I think a pro Palestinian student asked her about her plans for Palestine and Israel, she just shut this person down and said, "Do you want Trump to win? If you want Trump to win, say that." So it's really difficult to understand why these polls show that she's pulling ahead. I do feel like that the amount of money that was injected into her campaign right after she was replaced has a lot to do with it, because I think Biden's campaign was already spending twice as much as Trump's campaign on advertisements and propaganda. And now Kamala's campaign has been projected to spend about 2 or 3 times more than that. And, I feel like the US state, now talking about the state, is expecting or is trying to precipitate war in some uh, in some part of the world, whether it be with China or Russia or somewhere in the Middle East. I think it is trying to precipitate war, and it's trying to move policy towards that, trying to egg people and also Israel to do these things. And it's also trying to destabilize the darker nations of the world. You saw destabilization in Pakistan and Sri Lanka and Venezuela, and most recently in Bangladesh. And the coup in Bangladesh, you can only call it a coup, um, was an attack on the liberation movement, was an attack on the world peace movement. And you can see very clearly that this is part of possibly a concerted effort to sort of divide the world, install these puppet governments where you have these stooges of the American elite, and all of these things that are happening around the world sort of point towards the US trying to engage in basically a world war. And this part is pure speculation, but I do feel like, given their debt, they are trying to shift to a war economy, a more traditional war economy, where they can utilize central banks and the IMF, print a lot more money, and gain leverage to get out of the economic um, sort of trap that they have put themselves in. Um, but one thing is clear, which is that the US state, which is behind the Democratic or the Republican Party, have ulterior motives. And I think that Trump, who is harder to control, is the proverbial lesser of two evils. I don't like the man either. I like listening to his most recent speeches at the rallies. He doesn't inspire a lot of confidence with respect to the ideological struggle or the future of the American people. But I don't know. He does buy us more time, I feel. And like Purva said, more, I think that his base is more in touch with ground reality than the Democratic Party. And if not anything, we need to have faith in that.
Yeah, well, I wanted to add just one thing. I think, well, we've been talking about this for some weeks in free school, but I think more, like listening to Trump more, I think, like I was listening to his recent press conference, I think in Florida. Um, and I think, something that comes clear is it's almost as if he is he is the articulation of, he really embodies what all of these decades of the American people being completely decimated by a vicious ruling class, like what an attempt to honest speech even looks like at this point. And it's not what we like. It can't be what fits our bill of what inspiring or confident political speech should be. But there is, I mean, it does seem very clear when when he talks about the fact that it's not, like he literally said that, like, we are, more often than we believe, we are controlled by by thugs of foreign governments. And like, he did use that in plural, so he's not just talking about Ukraine. And of course, I don't think, yeah, everything he says about Israel is, it's it's nothing one can agree with. But it also seems to me that, I mean, he, like, as an individual, he's not an honest man in that sense, and he doesn't need to be. But I think what he represents is the possibility that, once his movement, like how you guys were saying, like, once his movement comes to see that what's standing in the way between, between poverty and what they consider to be, their place in America today, they once they see that it's war, and they are beginning to see that it's war. It's no, I find it very, yeah, I do find it hopeful that, this is, like, it's the beginning of an honest articulation of of a disappointed people, like, you've been saying, Doc. Like, it is a discontented people who do see him as representing something honest to them. So the kind of people who are looking up to him, it's very different from the kind of people looking up to a Kamala or a Biden, because I don't I think actually, like, I don't think Trump supporters view him as the lesser of two evils, but like Kamala supporters definitely do. It's that sort of, it's constantly trying to make a compromise with what you claim, your life and your vision for America is about. It's constantly trying to compromise that, okay, like, we're not going to get to, like, the worst possible place, but let's stick with this bad place. But I think the, like, at least what seems to me from the way Trump increasingly speaking and the way people respond to him, like, there is clearly a not completely worked out vision.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways what we are trying to do also is to understand, where American people are at, and to, like, to really understand this vision, to try to articulate this vision for ourselves also. And in fact, if I think even like this, like at this last press conference, he did mention, like, it was nothing profound, but it did bring up King. And even he, like, he would put into, at least he puts on the table the fact that we are at a time which is not very dissimilar from the 60s, which, like, from which a king arose. And like, he said something to the effect of how, yeah, of course, like, my rallies will never draw the kind of crowds that King's march on Washington drew, but I'm okay with that because I like Dr. King. But it's the kind of, it just puts this comparison which we have been talking about for a while. But it's interesting to see that it's reaching a place in the American people at large, where they're beginning to see that, okay, it's not absolutely outstanding to think about the two people in, like, to think of the two people on the same plane. And this goes to what we have been talking about a few weeks back, the idea, like the question to the man of destiny or farce. But to put them together, I think it shows a new stage, which I think Trump like does represent, its possibilities.
I wanted to quickly clarify something because I did criticize Trump's position on Israel, and I think those criticisms are valid. But I think that's where Baldwin becomes so important, because I think, some of these things just arise out of the contradictions of a social system that's rooted in white supremacy, and you can't really separate that from where somebody like a Trump might position himself in the question of Palestine. But I do think the thing that he stands for, in my opinion, is, his strong criticism of NATO, and his strong criticism of America involving itself in wars abroad. And I think and more than anything else, what he represents to so many people is a challenge to the establishment that has completely abandoned ordinary people. And that is how he should be viewed, not on the basis of isolated policy questions, because this election is not about policies as much as it is about the struggle for, like King would put it, the struggle for America's soul. What does it stand for in the world, and whether it will join hands with world humanity, because world humanity is trying to move somewhere. The rise of Asia uh, represents a movement, a forward movement through history. And the question is, where is America going to stand? And I think it's pretty clear, the events of the past, 6 months or so on, that the Democratic Party does not have the answer. It cannot show the way forward. It's stagnated and it's completely exhausted. And yeah, anyway, I just wanted to clarify.
I wanted to add to what you were saying there, how no political party can truly represent and advance humanity forward, and even this country forward in the way that the people can and must. Now, one of the conversations I had with the Palestinian performers, the older gentleman, man, something really stood out to me. He said that he was trying to make a point that he's like, I don't, and we don't hate Jewish people. We oppose Zionism. And I think he was really trying to connect with the event as a whole, especially this idea of love, which is not a sentimental feeling, but in this time especially is a political mandate that can and must take us forward. And the connection was with the Black struggle for freedom, and how, yes, we vehemently oppose a ruling class and are not saying to just let them do whatever they want, but love as a political action against people who are honestly wrong and can be even misguided. But ultimately, the only way out of this is that agapic love. And in the time of the civil rights movement and the struggle against the Vietnam War, that removal of our cooperation from that efforts, which directly involved the American people going to fight against the Vietnamese, was that concrete manifestation. And things are a little different now, in that we are not physically going to Israel to commit genocide, but there has to be in some way a removal of our cooperation from what this country and this government is trying to do. And hopefully Trump can do something in this regard, but ultimately the future of this country still rests with the American people, and people like the Palestinian performers who are looking for a way to make love real.
Yeah. Okay, I can read some comments and then maybe we can wrap up. If that sounds good with everyone. So a lot of these are from earlier when we were talking about the event. But Crystal said, "Good morning." M. Sparks said, "Birthday wishes for the great revolutionary James Baldwin." Added a lot of emojis. Tafari Melisizwe said, peace, beautiful people. Todd Doherty said, good morning, free school. Fired Play says, I hope you all feel better and fast. Thanks. And yeah, Todd earlier when we were talking about the event and Baldwin said, Jeremiah and Emily earlier are 100% correct on where the revolutionary struggle is and where it should continue to be. And then Neha said, congratulations to the free school and all of you for such a beautiful event. These reflections on the event are so powerful and so beautiful. I feel grateful and look forward to seeing the recording. I remember Doc saying at the beginning of the year at Baldwin that Baldwin's ideas help repair and help heal people produced by a loveless society, and hearing the reflections on the event makes it clear that this event was a concrete example of that, in the sense that by working together towards this year-long celebration of Baldwin, bringing together people from different walks of life, and the struggle for unity, for principled unity, it helps you to heal yourself through the struggle for ideas and also contribute to the making of the world. And Todd said that was beautiful. And Jahan said, it's sobering to note that Israel killed 100 people, including many children, by bombing a morning prayer at a school in Gaza. Both candidates are supporting this. American politics badly needs Baldwinian love. And then added, more than 2 weeks have passed, and the so-called free press in America has not done a single interview with Kamala Harris. This has been a coup and a coronation. And Todd says, I think is quoting something that talks about like centering love is the way out, but where's the heart and the passion of people that can save us all? And then someone who, I don't know how to pronounce their username, but just questioned whether the Bangladesh student movement is actually a coup. And I guess that's a longer conversation maybe for next week, because yeah, I don't actually know that much about what's been going on in Bangladesh. It seems like a pretty, I guess, like fluid situation with a lot of different, I guess, like components to it. But yeah, that's all the comments that I'm seeing for now. And yeah, I think that brings us to the end of this week's free school. But yeah, I just wanted to say, I think even going back to what we were just talking about, I feel like Baldwin, yeah, like part of this whole thing with like why we're even celebrating Baldwin is because it's like, it's so far past the time when you can just take things for granted, especially politically. And I think what we've put on the table, like all of these like philosophical questions, theoretical questions, questions of revolution, questions of chronology, and also questions of this political crisis and what it's constituted by, I think all of that has to be put on the table and examined anew, and you can't take anything for granted. And I think Baldwin is an example of that. And I feel like all of us in free school are trying our best to actually do justice to him and the way that he examined the world and didn't take anything for granted, but also saw new possibilities within that. And I think I'm really happy that, especially with the celebration, that I think a lot of people are being drawn into that same project and want to become part of it, or at least support it, I think, in different ways. But yeah, I think that's everything in terms of even the comments. But yeah, it's been a good, I guess, assessment of the celebration. And I think we'll be in person next week, right, at the church. Yeah, okay. So yeah, we'll be in person next week at the Church of the Crucifixion, our usual location, and look forward to seeing everyone again in person. I feel like it's always hard, like being virtual. I feel like it's a reminder of like the COVID days, but yeah, I really like being in person with you guys. So yeah, I will end the stream, but thank you to everyone who watched and who commented, and also everyone who came out for the celebration last week. And look forward to meeting again. Bye.